Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back. We are very excited about today's stream. We're going back to Fulton County, and apparently the fraud continues. They filed a lawsuit to get their documents back, their ballots, and it's looking like the entire litigation is illegitimate. We're going to talk about standing. We're going to talk about open records, and we're going to talk about the board. Why did the board file a lawsuit when they didn't even vote on it? We've got a timeline to assemble, and the scam continues. So thank you for being here and for sharing the show. I think a lot of people need to see what we're about to go through today. We appreciate you helping with that effort. We also got new subpoenas that apparently have flown out over to John Brennan's crew. So we've got 2020 election fraud today, 2016 election fraud today, and then we're talking about solutions about how to stop this fraud moving forward, courtesy of the SAVE Act. And we're very glad that you're here. Thank you for subscribing, liking this video, and doing all the things. We're excited to get into it. And so let's just do it because we've got the documents queued up. And so as you can see, it starts now. The fraud in Fulton continues. We now have questions about whether the lawsuit that's brought by the Fulton County Commissioners, whether that is even valid and legitimate. We're going to go through a timeline and we're going to go through some emails. We have to pay close attention to dates and to times. And if we remember, the raid to go get those ballots happened back on January 28th, 2026. And what we then saw was the Fulton County chairman called Rob Pitts come out and make this announcement. And I want to replay this. I know we've talked about it a couple times, but he is going to say a couple things that are going to be very critical as we move forward. And so let's listen in to this man.
Wide locally, there's been a lot of speculation about what we are doing, what we should be doing, advice and counsel from all quarters, particularly elected officials, would-be elected officials, and so forth. But I ask you to...
Let me rewind this. I think I had this incorrectly queued up. False start.
But I want to be here, particularly on such short notice. I mean, I know most of you, but I want to begin by saying that this is the election season, nationally, statewide, locally. There's been a lot of speculation about what we are doing, what we should be doing, advice and counsel from all quarters, particularly elected officials, would-be elected officials, and so forth. But I ask you to talk to us before reporting things that may not be factual.
Say it.
This is a serious case. Now, this morning, Fulton County filed a motion in federal court on my behalf, personally, and on behalf of the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections.
Pause. All right, so this morning, when was that? That was 13 days ago. 13 out of 17, subtract the 2, you get 4. He made this announcement February 4th in the morning. That's when the lawsuit was filed. And the lawsuit was filed on behalf of Fulton County and himself personally. But does he just get to decide unilaterally that the board voted to file the lawsuit? Or does he actually have to go get the votes in order to do that? Of course, it's the latter. And we're going to show why specifically he did not comply with Georgia law. So the argument from the Georgia people is that they do follow the law. Turns out back in 2020, they didn't. And now they're still not following the law as they're trying to get their ballots back. So we're going to come back to that. But before we do, let's also talk about standing because frankly, this guy doesn't even have justification to sue. This board doesn't have justification to sue because remember, the people that were in possession of the ballots was the clerk of the courts. And we heard that from Nadine back during the body camera kerfuffle. And we'll watch this once again because this is all becoming clear and timeline matters. We have to talk about dates, times, and the person who's in possession of the ballots. If somebody is suing to get the ballots back, in this case, it's Fulton Rob Pitts, Do they even have possessory authority? Can they even make a demand for these files if they're not theirs, if they belong to the clerk of the court? And remember, we had 2 warrants in this matter. They went and got a warrant for the county, and then they said, actually, we don't even have the ballots. They're in possession of the clerk of the court. We remember this. Need some audio on this. Where is the button? Right here.
You have a search warrant?
No.
When did they get here?
About 12:30.
Just unannounced.
Unannounced.
I'm gonna try and have the names of everybody that was out here. I already know how it's gonna go, but I mean, if they refuse, that's on them. Right here. All right, so we were given very limited information.
So we have a search warrant for this, like literally for the entire location.
Okay.
But now we're going to get amending another search warrant for another location called. Okay. So we'll have that pretty soon. So
This is all in regards to election side stuff.
where you know where we're here, right? So I can't discuss more.
I got you.
More than that, but as long as we keep, the big thing is just trying to keep media. Someone let media in here and keep media clear out of here.
What's happening now is that their warrant is wrong.
Okay.
It had the wrong, it's not in elections possession, it's in clerk's possession.
It's in the clerk's possession. They're not our files. So how can Fulton County, and Rob Pitts and the rest of the crew, how can they sue if it's not theirs?
So it had the wrong department.
So on our end, nobody received a copy of.
The attorneys asked them for it, they finally gave them a copy. Then the attorney's like, it's wrong. So they're allegedly waiting for the judge to update it.
What was wrong on there? It was
It
labeled
didn't say,
from.
it just says, elections, which we don't have, in which they knew that before they got here.
The warrant will be amended slightly, but for all intents and purposes, what they had is what it's going to look like. We wanted to let her facilitate us moving through the building to unlock the gates so that we don't have to breach it, because
I got you.
one way or the other, the records are coming with us today.
One way or another, the records are coming with us today. So Nadine Williams says it's not with elections, it's with the clerk. So a bunch of layers here to show exactly why this lawsuit is such a rigged and false lawsuit. Here we can see it's not a lawsuit that's brought by the clerk. It's brought by Fulton County Board of Commissioners, Fulton County Board of Registrations, and Fulton County, Georgia elections. Do you see clerk of the court in there anywhere? No. So that's like you suing on behalf of somebody else to get their files back. You don't have standing for that. It's not your files. They can go sue, but not you. So the whole thing is basically invalid from the very beginning, just on standing. That's one way to just nuke this lawsuit. Now we're going to come back to this because this illegitimate body that is now suing submitted today a new amended motion. And we're going to read through the whole thing and see exactly what's inside of it. But we're showing right now why it's not even worth what it's written on. It is brought by the wrong party. They don't have a possessory interest in the documents. The clerk should have sued if the clerk wanted the documents back. But the clerk is not freaked out about going to jail, probably, because they were just the custodians of the records. These are the people who are freaked out. And it turns out when this lawsuit was filed, they didn't even have permission from the board, according to Georgia law, to actually do it. And I'll show you exactly how this is breaking down. This came out on February 16th. It's a letter that is sent by a woman called Julie Adams. And Julie Adams, shout out, and the election crew have been keeping their eyes on this for a long time. And they sent this letter yesterday over to the Attorney General of Georgia, the Honorable Chris Carr. And they're explaining how fraudulent this whole thing is. They say, urgent. This is a request for investigation. There is being misrepresentation right now to a federal court by Rob Pitts and the election crew due to unauthorized litigation, misrepresentation of government entities, and an Open Meetings Act violation. So again, everywhere we look in Georgia, they're just kind of bending the rules and just kind of doing things that they think that they're entitled to do without following proper procedure. That's the problem that we've had this entire time. And they're doing it again. She says, all right, Attorney General Carr, I'm Julie Adams. I serve as a member of the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections on the BRE. And I am requesting your immediate review of actions taken by the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, the BOC, the chairman of the BOC, Rob Pitts, the BRE chair and the BRE attorney and Fulton County Attorney's Office. They all submitted this lawsuit in violation of Georgia Open Meetings Act, because they filed it without board approval, and they exceed statutory authority. They misrepresent what the board wanted, and we are now in active federal litigation. Here's what happened. Under Georgia, there's OCGA Georgia law 50-14-1B, 50-14-4, and 50-14-5. Rules, laws that they have to follow, and actions and agency decisions that are made in violation of those rules. It's called the Open Meetings Act, so that we can have transparency. The same thing we've been screaming about for years now. Anything that is passed or done without approval is void. Can't do it. So the lawsuit arguably is void. Let's break down the timeline. Following the execution of the FBI warrant on January 28th, we were here. It was a glorious day indeed. Fulton County Board of Commissioners, they had a meeting. First meeting after the FBI warrant execution back on the 28th was on February 4th at 10 a.m. We also saw that they had another meeting February 12th, just days ago, at 11 a.m. But remember what Rob Pitts just did. At 9:41 a.m. on February 4th, we just watched the video, Chairman Rob Pitts, 9:41 a.m. Okay, he came out. This morning, we filed a lawsuit. He announced on live television that he and the BRE had filed a lawsuit about the FBI's seizure of ballots and the election documents. Rob Pitts said, we just heard him, this morning, Fulton County filed a motion in federal court on my behalf personally and on behalf of the Board of Registration and Elections. That's Rob Pitts and the Board of Registration and Elections versus the United States of America. Again, they don't even have a basis to even sue in the first place, but they are because they're panicked. They're freaked. They know they're caught. The motion seeks the return of all files for the 2020 election that were confiscated by the FBI last week. You can see it right here. During the raid, we like the word raid. We know the government doesn't like that, but it sounds cooler than execution of a search warrant, and it's a lot easier to say. But yeah, that happened, and then they sued. Problem is, according to Julie Adams, who's on the board that would vote to approve this, the BRE never voted to authorize the lawsuit. Weird. Feels like that happens a lot over there. Now, at that moment, when he came out and announced it at 9:40 in the morning, 9:41, the BRE had not met on that day. The BRE had not voted at that time. The BRE, the board, was not even aware that they were suing as part of a federal lawsuit, according to Julie Adams. Then at 12:50 p.m., okay, after the lawsuit has been filed, this is what we're talking about. We have allegations that Georgia just backfills their mistakes. Oops, Joe Biden won, and we digitally inflated the numbers, and the election was stolen. So now we have to double and triple scan ballots, right? Now they have to go backwards and then fix the problem. At 12:50, over 3 hours after the lawsuit was announced on live TV by Rob Pitts, the chair then of the board went back into the emails and tried to go get the votes by email, even though the Open Meetings Act specifically forbids this practice. That's the whole point of having an open meeting, so that stuff is not buried under cover and in the gutter of Fulton. So she responded, Julie Adams, she's a part of the board. She says, I responded that I did not support litigation. And she even noted at the time, this is a violation of the Open Meetings Act. But again, they don't care. Well, whatever. Shut up, Julie. Get out of here. The board members and the board attorney were all on the email. Okay, so every time they come out and lecture us and they say, well, we did an audit, blah, 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 they're all not following the rules, even the lawyers in the email chain. The chair of the board responded, yeah, I got all emails of everybody and we all voted by email. Additionally, Julie says, I forwarded to the lawyer and he responded that he received it. So they know she's objecting. You can't take an email vote on this, even though you filed the lawsuit that morning. These facts violate two provisions of Georgia law, OCGA, which under B1, official action must occur in public. Okay, that's the law in Georgia. And number two, it prohibits email voting and non-public decision making. You're not allowed to do that. And the email chain looked like this. They even attached it down here. And here's how it happened. You see at 12:50 p.m., that's in the afternoon, right there. In the afternoon, Rob Pitts came out and said, we sued this morning. They didn't even have the votes before they filed their illegal lawsuit. So then Sherry Allen sent this one out to everybody on the board. This goes out to Teresa Crawford It goes out to Julie Adams, the author and the person who is assembling this. Shout out to Julie Adams on this. Douglas Shelby copying Chad Alexis. So the email comes out going, oh crap, we should probably vote on this before we actually start suing the federal government to get our rigged ballots back. Good morning, all. Please email me if you support filing a legal response in court to challenge last week's search warrant. It's already been filed, according to Rob Pitts. To go and challenge now the search warrant pertaining to the 2020 election documents. Now, second, all of us at one time or another have discussed moving our meetings to Fulton County Government Center. We're going to go into the Assembly Hall. Our next meeting is on February 12th, and it's going to take place there. Okay, kind of a little side note there. Signed by Sherry Allen, Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections. So then people start responding to her. Okay, 1:14 p.m., that's the afternoon. Rob Pitts already said the lawsuit has been filed. Chairwoman Allen, Teresa Crawford said, yes, I'm in support of a legal response. Great job, Teresa. Then we saw another one from Douglas Shelby, who sent this one in at 1:52. He fires it right back after her about 30 minutes later, saying, I am also in favor. Well, that's good because the lawsuit's already been filed. Your vote doesn't even matter. Now we're just having to, what we call, paper the file. Or, in other words, commit fraud. Here, another one at 2:02. Julie Adams comes out, and shout out, she's a board member. She's on the Republican Party. She says, I am not in favor of filing a legal response. That's my vote. And then she says again in 2:22, 20 minutes later, she says, wait a minute. This is weird. While I appreciate getting a vote on this, the Open Meetings Act requires, Georgia law requires it, executive session with discussion to take official legal action. Okay, the board is not even following their own rules. And a vote in an open meeting. Did that happen? No, it's all done by email. Then Sherry Allen responds, and she's a lawyer, ESQ on there. She says, oh, I got your little whiny note, Julie. Received, thank you. Okay, lawsuit's already been filed. Rob Pitts said so. Julie sent this, see the message below. And another one, Office of Fulton County Attorney, Supervising County Counsel, Chad Alexis, he gets it too. She forwards it to him at 2:39. She says, what are we doing voting an email? Georgia law says we have to have a discussion about it and vote in public. And that is not happening right now. So she forwards it over to Fulton County and he says, good day, received. Now, if you just reassemble the timeline, we had meetings at various locations, supposed to have open meetings, as the law says, January 8th, February 12th, 2026. The FBI warrant was served on January 28th. Chairman Pitts came out, filed the lawsuit on 2/4, his announcement. So then we have the full meeting schedule attached, the February meeting agenda. Guess what is not in those meeting agendas? Federal litigation against the U.S. government, but they did it anyways. Now, then we had other meetings. We've got February 4th. She attaches the agenda there. The only mention of any litigation is on page 8 under the executive session. And the executive session says, this is closed. It's about litigation, about real estate, and it's about personnel for Pitts. They have the whole meeting up there on YouTube. And we may have covered that one here. But at 3:35:28, then they entertain a motion for a break and an executive session. And during that break in the meeting, the open meeting, they discuss real estate, they discuss litigation, they discuss personal items, and the motion passes. Then at 5:31 that night, Chairman Pitts, without a motion, says, without objection, we will resume regular order of business items discussed in the executive session. County attorney comes out and votes on a couple things, whether they're going to hire outside counsel and more. Those are the only items on the agenda. And as you see, the meeting ends. There's no motion to adjourn. All the votes were taken in the agenda, and the lawsuit had already been filed. The executive session is all there. Now, when you add all of that up, what that means is that the votes were not there when the lawsuit was filed. So what's happening is they are in violation of the laws. Let's back up and go to the explanation now that we've seen some of those documents about how the meetings worked and about how the emails went down. Backing up, she says, there was no funding that's even approved for this lawsuit. The lawsuit caption, as we saw, identifies Robert L. Pitts, Chairman, Fulton County Board of Commissioners, which is the board that doesn't even have a possessory interest in the documents. They don't even have standing to begin with, in addition to being in violation of Georgia open records law and open meetings laws. Now, despite this appearing to be Chairman Pitts in his official capacity, writes Julie Adams, he made it quite clear more than once in his press conference that he's also suing the federal government in his individual capacity as well. But either way, the Board of Commissioners must approve all county funding for anybody to file a lawsuit. You can't just go steal money. This isn't Fannie Willis land anymore. They would have had to approve this action. But the Board of Commissioners meeting, it began at 10 a.m. after the lawsuit filing was already announced. The agenda contained no item authorizing funding for the lawsuit or Rob Pitts' personal litigation and funding for this with outside counsel. No public discussion occurred. There was no recorded vote in any of the meetings. In conclusion, so these are violations under Georgia law. Georgia law cited here, E1, E2, agenda must list all matters, including litigation against the government. And you must have action on unlisted items. If it's not on the list, it is invalid. You can't just shoehorn in, or in other words, like they stuffed ballots in there. Now they're just trying to stuff litigation right in the middle of the proceedings. Also, other violations. A county acts only through its governing authority. The governing authority may only act by majority vote. Action must occur in a public meeting with a recorded vote, not via email. Then the county attorney sued. Now, there's no authorization to do this. They filed a lawsuit despite there not being a vote from the Board of Commissioners. There was no Board of Registration and Elections vote either. No one had a meeting prior to the filing. They just did it. A government attorney may act only upon authorization of the governing authority. Look at Georgia law. This also applies to county attorneys by principle. Then what happened is after the lawsuit was already filed, they tried to backfill it. They tried to ratify it back on February 12th. At the next meeting, after the lawsuit was already in, the agenda contained no item referencing litigation or ratification. The board still voted to ratify participation anyways. Okay, there's a free-for-all in Georgia is what it sounds like. So again, more violations. E1, E2 for the second meeting on February 12th. This is a person on the board who's following the rules. Agendas must list all matters. It didn't. Anything that is unlisted is invalid. You can't just make stuff up on the fly. Add it to the agenda, or you got to add it to the next meeting. Thus, the Board of Registration and Elections was never legally authorized to be a plaintiff. If Rob Pitts wants to go dig out of his pocket and file a lawsuit, presumably he could do that, but not on behalf of the county. And they did that. As you see, he put his name and listed it all right here. Rob Pitts, Chairman, Fulton County Board, filing lawsuits on behalf of all of them. So this is unauthorized. Now, since joining the board in August 2024, Julie Adams says, Chair, the person who's running the board, Sherry Allen, has initiated a pattern of filing lawsuits just like this. No board authorization at all. She bypasses the required public meeting process and the statutory requirement that the board act only through publicly noticed votes. Never happened. Then they want to turn around and tell us this was the most safe and secure election. They followed all the rules. Nothing went wrong in 2020. Now, the first lawsuit was to stop another investigation. So it's a chronicle now of all of the other times they've done this. The chair filed a lawsuit to try to stop the state election board investigation. Once again, back then, the board did not meet beforehand. There was no vote on it, and the matter was not on any agenda. It's just whatever they want. They can do whatever they want all the time with no consequences. As long as they win, then they can install their people into positions of power. The Board of Registration and Elections met after the lawsuit was filed, and then they attempted to ratify the authorization. The agenda contained only the standard executive session notice. It wasn't on the agenda, therefore invalid. There was no mention of litigation at all, and the public got no notice that a vote would occur. But they're still doing it. Under Georgia law, any action that is unlisted on the agenda is invalid, and thus the ratification was improper and legally ineffective. Then we had this happen again. The second unauthorized lawsuit, they tried to quash a board subpoena. The state election board issued a subpoena to the board, not to the members, but instead of bringing the matter to the board for a discussion and a vote, the chair once again filed a lawsuit in her own name and in the election director's name. Now, Julie says, the board is responsible for overseeing any subpoena that comes to us. When they get a subpoena, they're supposed to, under Georgia law, meet publicly and vote on how to respond. Did that meeting happen? No. Was any agenda item on there? No. Was any authorization approved in order to have this litigation occur? No. The lawsuit was filed without any board action, despite directly involving the board's legal obligations. Now, under federal rules of civil procedure 17B, this is a civil lawsuit to go reclaim their property, which isn't theirs. It belongs to the clerk of the court. A government entity has capacity to sue only through its governing body. You have to go through the boards to do it. So, Attorney General, we are now asking for immediate action from you. You have an obligation to step in. This is a legal governance. Given the urgency of the February 27th trial for this lawsuit, I respectfully request that your office investigate whether the actions of the chair, Rob Pitts, and their lawyer, and the chairman and the county attorney were acting without legal authority, which clearly they were. It's all documented. Determine whether the Open Meetings Act was violated. Assess whether the Board of Registration and Elections is even a proper plaintiff to go get these files back because they belong to the clerk. And provide guidance or corrective action before the federal hearing. Notify the federal judge Boulay of any improper filings of the plaintiffs, which have been submitted now under the color of law, to the judge who's going to be hearing this very soon, in about 10 days. All signed by Julie Adams. Shout out to Julie Adams. Make sure you're supporting her. Member, Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections, also copied over to U.S. Attorney Thomas Albus, which is just awesome. So amazing report here. Of course, the press conference, we covered that. It was at 9:41 a.m. Then the email started to come out after the fact at 12:50 p.m. Oops. Fulton County Commissioner Pitts held a press conference this morning. Fulton County filed a motion in federal court. You didn't have the votes at all. And now they are busted. So we're going to see what the judge does with this and what another U.S. attorney does with this. But it shows that the fraud continues. They want to turn around and say, no, it was the most safe and secure election. Everything was perfectly appropriate. Is this the type of auditing that they did? Is this the type of investigation that Scott McAfee did as the inspector general? All of them just doing whatever they want all the time without any adherence to the rules? Certainly seems to be that way. And so they have now responded. The whole thing is, as you can see, largely invalid because they didn't follow the rules and they're not even the right party. But the lawsuit continues. We're in front of Jane Paul Booley. We had some new submissions today, and there was an amended motion. Remember, their first motion we read here was kind of a joke. So the judge said, all right, go back and file something else. I need you to amend it now that the full affidavit has been unsealed and you can see inside. We read through the full affidavit previously. We'll probably come back and reference it again because we also still want to address this on the merits, right? The argument is that the entire lawsuit is invalid, no standing, and in direct violation of Georgia law. But let's also address their hack arguments, shall we? They submitted this today, and they attached to it a big fat declaration from this guy called Ryan Macias. Ryan Macias is this fellow right here. And Ryan Macias has an interesting background because he's a big Katie Hobbs fan and came out in Arizona, was working with Katie Hobbs, hired by her in Arizona to help shore up our rigged elections here as an official recount observer. And you know what his position is because he also was on a nonpartisan national task force on election crises. He's a member of that. And he said back then that Trump, quote, incited a violent insurrection, right? Anytime somebody says that, it's like that scene out of that movie with the Germans, you know, and he's like this, three guys up. You go, all right. So we know exactly who you are. If you say something like that, we go, oh, okay. So you're absolutely a partisan hack. And he said this was an attack on our Capitol. He called it white supremacist rioters attacking the Capitol. Okay, that's their expert. So now we're also going to be getting into the battle of the experts. We've got on our side, Philip Stark, I think is his name, the guy who invented the auditing methodology, versus this guy. And now they brought out the big guns. The same guy who helped, apparently, in my opinion, steal the election for Katie Hobbs and challenge the Cyber Ninja investigation. And there's a lot going on in Arizona right now. We'll come back to that probably tomorrow. But he's joining the team And now they are working hard, scrambling, even though their entire lawsuit is invalid, to get these documents back. So here's what they say. All right, Judge, we are now amending our request. We want to get these files back. Here's what's going on. This is from the Fulton County Rob Pitt's perspective. On January 28th, the DOJ got a search warrant. It was amazing. They call it unprecedented in American history. Well, stealing elections through massive, widespread fraud is also pretty dang unprecedented. But they seized the original and only copy of the Fulton County election records. Now the unsealed affidavit is out. We've looked through it extensively. It confirms the warrant is equally unprecedented in its theory of probable cause, which is a lie. We'll decompress and deconstruct all these arguments, subjecting us to improper seizure, callously disregarding our constitutional rights. What is your constitutional right? Nadine Williams even admitted the warrant was for the clerk. So if anyone has an argument about constitutional rights, it's them. It requires immediate relief. So we want the return of the documents because we know we're doomed if we don't get them. They give us a couple buckets. They say, the First Amendment demands probable cause, not possible cause. That's clever, really neat. So the affidavit fails according to them. And let's just pause and really understand what probable cause actually is as it applies to search warrants. This came over from cornell.edu, so you know it's smart. They say, here's what's going on as probable cause relates to search warrants. This is the definition. They're going to say this is all an investigation about hypotheticals and what ifs and maybe this happened and we need more evidence to develop our case. In other words, they're trying to essentially say that the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Like you have to convict them at this stage of the litigation. That's not true at all. Search warrant is to go uncover evidence, saying probable cause exists where there is a fair probability that a search will uncover evidence of a crime. That's it. For warrantless searches, fast forward, this was a warrant. Now, a judge may issue a search warrant, and a judge did, when the supporting affidavit, which we've read through, contains credible facts establishing probable cause. Credible facts. Affidavits rely on police observations. In this case, it was an FBI lawyer who actually drafted the affidavit. And officers' training and experience are all relevant in assessing credibility about the officer's understanding that there is a fair probability it's going to uncover evidence of a crime. That's the standard. Now, information from victims may also be used, and evidence from other witnesses may be used. And that's the standard. It's not something that's beyond a reasonable doubt, even though they're going to try to get very clever here, saying it's not possible cause, it's probable cause. Yeah, it's a fair probability. It doesn't mean it's guaranteed. It is possible that there is nothing there, right? But it's a fair probability that there is something that exists. So all of this is just a red herring. Possible cause is adjusting the standard. They know what the standard is, but the standard is damning for them. So they have to change it and then make their arguments match the changed standard. They say the affidavit fails that constitutional requirement, not according to two judges, apparently, who signed two warrants. Despite years of investigations, the affidavit does not identify facts that establish probable cause that anyone committed a crime, right? And they're saying, who? It's decentralized criminality. An election is like organized chaos. There's so many people involved. It's really hard to pin down who is responsible for it. And people like Rob Pitts, as we played previously, I think last week, he came out and he said, I went around and I looked at all of the counties. I went around and talked to people. Nobody told me anything was wrong, trying to insulate himself against any possible criminal charges because he doesn't want to be responsible for all of the fraud. Instead, FBI special agent called Evans, shout out, all but admits the seizure will yield evidence of a crime only if certain hypotheticals are true. And he says in there, if these deficiencies were a result of an intentional act, it would be a violation of federal law. If they say. So that is not enough. You can't have unsubstantiated hypotheticals, and this violated the Fourth Amendment. And again, it's about a fair probability. It doesn't need to be 100% proven. They can be wrong. They could get all the files, get all the ballots, and say, oops, we were wrong about this, and we're not actually going to charge anybody, right? Investigations happen all the time. People don't get charged. So this seizure violated the Fourth Amendment, yeah. Now, second, instead of alleging probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, the affidavit does nothing more than describe the types of human errors, okay, which they're basically acknowledging, that its own sources confirm occur in almost every election. So it's not intentional wrongdoing. It's just a bunch of idiots in Fulton who just don't understand that you can't rescan ballots multiple times. They say mislabeling an expected margin of error as defects or deficiencies is not probable cause, and so you can't seize our materials. And third, the affidavit also omits numerous material facts, including from the very reports that they cite. The affidavit not only fails to allege any particular witness is reliable or credible, it omits discrediting information about those witnesses. And so now all of the people in the actual search warrant, now they're saying these people are lacking in credibility. That's basically the argument. All, like 9 of these witnesses are invalid. All of them, it continues on. This, of course, the affidavit signed by the FBI special agent called Hugh Raymond Evans. And so the argument continues. Even if the affidavit establishes probable cause, the seizure of the original materials is unreasonable and in callous disregard because the statute of limitations have lapsed on the only crimes under investigation. Nuh-uh, not true. As we see, the statute of limitations, as we saw in the affidavit, showed that there were changes to files that they identified in 2024. Let's see if this will search. And see, let's do just a control F on this and see 2024 began reviews. Yeah, right here. Remember witness 2 stated, sure, if all of the crimes happened in 2020, yeah, maybe the statute of limitations expired. But no, witness 2 stated back from the affidavit, while she was reviewing the images, she also noticed modification dates. With the files well past the time frame of the 2020 election. So this is an ongoing crime. You're committing new crimes by modifying files that should not be modified. Why are you doing that? She observed at least one file with a modified date of January 11, 2024 in the affidavit. So that feels like a pretty fair probability that a crime was committed. Why is somebody perverting and frauding up the files in 2024? That extends the statute of limitations. It's an ongoing crime. So now you got another 5 years from now, along with the others modified prior to January 11, 2024. So no statute of limitations problems either. Nice try. The warrant also violates Georgia's state sovereignty by enjoining a pending state court proceeding and preventing Georgia from performing our constitutionally mandated role of administering elections. And the respondent improperly used the criminal warrant to circumvent a pending lawsuit in which it did request the same records. And there was another set of litigation that was going on. And they're going to reference this other concept in the law called the abstention doctrine. The abstention doctrine says maybe federal courts shouldn't get involved in certain things if the state is already processing it. But this was decided in the context of a criminal case. And there are exceptions to this doctrine. It's a general rule, right? If the state is handling something, you don't want the federal courts. You don't want parallel litigation that's like fighting with itself. So one side should acquiesce to the other side. There's rules about how that works, but there are problems with that when the state is incompetent. There are exceptions to the doctrine. It's been held that federal courts may exercise authority over a state proceeding where the state's forum is incompetent to adjudicate this because of bias. Okay, the whole state is incompetent. They don't even follow the rules in filing the lawsuit in the first place. So all of this, must states' rights nonsense is nonsense. We don't have to, under the Supremacy Clause, and as a nation that's interested in secure federal elections, just acquiesce to fraudulent states. That's ridiculous. That's why we have the Supremacy Clause in the first place. So if the state's forum is incompetent to adjudicate because they're, for example, riddled with bias and very interested in covering up evidence of their own crimes, that's not an excuse. It's in the law. So as you see, every single argument that they're making is basically weak. Now, petitioners satisfy relief, the requirements for relief. We want the return of the records. We want verification of what was taken and how it was handled. We want detailed chain of custody documentation and more. They're not even your files there, Rob. So on January 28th, Rob Pitts the government requested a warrant legally seeking the seizure of virtually every scrap of paper that Rob Pitts the clerk possessed during the 2020 election. We want every single scrap of paper including your fraudulent tallies. In support of the warrant, the affiant, the FBI special agent, who happens to also be a lawyer, identified 2 crimes purportedly under investigation: a misdemeanor relating to election records retentions and a felony statute that criminalizes efforts to deprive or defraud residents. Both have a 5-year statute of limitations, which has expired. Wrong. The affidavit said files were modified fraudulently, fair probability that somebody modified that file. We don't know who exactly yet. That's why we needed to get a search warrant and go get the files and get all the records. Section of this law, 20701, the records retention statute, makes it a misdemeanor to fail willfully to preserve all records and papers which come into his possession. Now, the statute does not expressly reference ballot images or tabulator tapes, and the ballot images we know were nuked. Why? Probably because the votes wouldn't match the ballot images. The numbers that were reported, you want to go look at the images to validate those, they don't match. Now, another section of the law makes it a felony to deprive residents of a fair election. Those are the rules that are argued are being violated, the laws. Now, in support of the warrant, the FBI agent said that there were many allegations of electoral impropriety. He said some of the allegations of impropriety have been disproven, and there were a lot of theories going around. Not all of them were accurate. And he wrongly asserted that some have been substantiated, including through admissions by Fulton County, which they have admitted a lot of these things. We've looked at the document. In fact, Brian Kemp's office, maybe Fulton County didn't make those admissions, but Brian Kemp said that there were 36 incongruencies, or whatever language he used, anomalies that were problematic that they couldn't identify. So the FBI agent went on to identify 5 so-called deficiencies or defects in the November 3rd election. He goes through, and in the actual affidavit, this is where they're pulling it from, he walks us through some of those. Let's see, right there. Okay, so they're basically copying and pasting right from this section in the actual affidavit. They write, the tabulator machines used by Fulton County are designed to create and save a scanned image of each ballot. Fulton County has admitted that it did not have scanned images of all 528,000 ballots counted during the original vote, or 527,000 ballots counted during the recount. They've also confirmed that during the recount of the votes, some ballots were scanned multiple times, twice or 3 times. Ballot images made available in response to this do show ballots with unique markings duplicated within the ballot images. It's the coffee stain example, or it's the I'm writing in George Washington for Fulton County DA. George Washington again, same handwriting, looks the same. So during the risk limiting audit, auditors counting the votes by hand reported vote tallies for batches inconsistent with actual votes within the batch. So either they're intentionally reporting different numbers, and that's a crime, or they're just morons. And it's wild how everything is just moron after moron. You start to think, wait a minute, maybe it's just a moron strategy. And it's actually intentional negligence, knowing that you can just always defer to negligence. You can just say, no, I didn't intend to do it. I'm just an idiot. But intentional negligence is a very nice way to cover up your criminality. So with the actual votes within the batch, the state's Performance Review Board reported the Secretary of State investigators confirmed inaccurate batch tallies from the risk limiting audit. Numbers don't match, according to the FBI special agent, former lawyer, I think. Auditors assisting in this also reported counting purported absentee ballots that had never been creased or folded, as would be required for the ballot to be mailed. And you'd have to put it into a sealed envelope. It's an absentee ballot. It travels. It's going to have evidence of transportation inside of it. And on the day of the deadline to report the recount results, Fulton County Fannyland reported a recount totaling 511,000 ballots. However, that is 17,000 ballots fewer than the original count. And what was the margin of error in Georgia? 11,900 votes. Following day, Fulton County came out and said, oops, we found him. We shoved him back in. So rather than elaborating on this, writes Rob Pitts and his lawyers, the affidavit compiles a smattering of over a dozen witness statements under the headings missing ballot images, duplicated ballots, tabulator tapes, pristine ballots, 7 Hill strategy reports, and more. All of that seems to me and to federal judges to be a fair probability of evidence of crimes. And rather than explain why any of this constitutes probable cause, the affiant speculates that if these deficiencies were intentional, then the election records are evidence of the crimes, right? There's a fair probability that they were intentional. That's why the judge approved the warrant. So they say, we have a substantial interest in getting our property back. This whole section is like a joke because they're not your property. They're supposed to be stored with the custodian of records, in this case, the clerk of the court. So they can sue, but not you. An aggrieved person who had their property stolen can file to get them back. They say, that's us. Here we satisfy all four factors of relief. One, did this display a callous disregard of the constitutional rights of the movement? No, it didn't. They're not your files. So your rights have not been violated. Has an individual interest in the need for the property for what? Would be irreparably injured and has no adequate remedy of law, so order the files to come back. Now, there can be no dispute that the petitioners, Fulton County, are constitutionally authorized to possess and own the property. Under Georgia law, they do have a possessory interest in the original records for numerous reasons, including ongoing pending litigation, right? So now they're dumping into the scraping to go find some justification to establish that they have property rights in this interest, even though the warrant, Nadine Williams said this, if they had possessory interest over these files, they wouldn't have needed to go get a second warrant. Nadine said, you can't go get these files, go get a second one. They're not ours. We just played the body cam video a while ago at the start of the show. They say the Georgia Constitution says counties can delegate authority to regulate their property, and we'll have a fight over this. You can see they're digging in. They say the county governing authority shall have the control of all property belonging to the county. The governing authority of the county has exclusive jurisdiction over all of this, and you can delegate it. They did delegate it over to the clerk. So they're filing, they're trying to basically take the clerk and say, well, the clerk is a part of Fulton County, and we are the Fulton County commissioners. So we have umbrella authority to go get their files, is their argument. We would say, no, there's no standing here. Nadine Williams even said that. Now, as explained, this is disregarding our constitutional rights, right? So we'll have a fight over that. Standing, I'm sure, is going to be part of the response from the DOJ when that comes back down, but we'll wait for that. Now, the allegations, and that's basically all they got. Like, we do have an interest. It is our property because we're Fulton, and you took the records from a subset of Fulton, and so we can act on their interest, even though this whole lawsuit was brought illegally in violation of open meeting laws. But we continue. They dumped that one because they're probably going to lose on that, I would suspect. That's the whole argument on their possessory interest. That's it. Then we move on. Then they say the allegation on the face of the affidavit is also not probable cause. They callously disregarded our rights, and this compels you to give us our documents back. This is filled with what ifs. That's because it's a criminal investigation. They say the affidavit does not identify a single piece of evidence from the FBI's investigation that establishes probable cause that anyone intentionally, right? There's no intent. It's by design. It's decentralized, negligent criminality. Nobody can be prosecuted because it's hard to pinpoint somebody, and everybody's just an idiot. It's not intentional. And so it's no willful violation. Instead of relying on personal knowledge, it's a smorgasbord of witness speculation, talking about deficiencies or defects. But the affidavit cannot bootstrap speculative hearsay into probable cause. All right. Even if the paragraph is true, which it is, it fails to establish a fair probability that contraband evidence will be found in a particular place. I disagree. So does a federal judge. Obviously, that's why the warrants were signed. It's not mere suspicion. There's a whole smorgasbord, as they said, of witnesses who are explaining that they sent complaints in that were not properly investigated, that files are being modified in 2024. It's not just a bunch of what ifs, like, well, maybe this could happen or maybe this could happen. It's witnesses, witness two, saying, I was there. I was looking at the files. All the files are modified. Pretty clear. It's very specific. It's not what ifs. The affidavit puts forth no facts. We just looked at it. Both require willful violations of the law. Who changed the files? That's an intentional act. The affiant does not allege facts that establish any fair probability that an unknown person violated the statute. Yes, it does. You can just fast forward through this. It's ridiculous. You could just see the affidavit says explicitly that something is happening. People are changing things. We don't know exactly who is changing things, but somebody went in there and changed the files. according to a witness. And if that is explainable, if there's an explanation for that, then the investigation will either discover that, or if there's not an explanation, criminal charges can come, and then the defendant can explain it. But it is in the affidavit. It's not all just speculation and platitudes. So they say it's deficient to say, if I develop additional evidence at some later point in time. This is how investigations work all the time. And they say there's no probable cause. Obviously, a judge disagreed. So they acknowledge that the supposed irregularities are also immaterial. They say the allegations are difficult to track, but the election irregularities it identifies come into 5 buckets, saying that all the witnesses are bad. And even if true, it concerns records of no consequence to the outcome of the election. And this is where they start to, I think, reveal the truth here. First, there's no fraud. Remember, no fraud at all. Okay, there's a little bit of fraud, but it's not widespread. It's only just here, like in this little town. Okay, it is widespread. There's fraud all over the nation, but it's not widespread fraud that changed the outcome of the election. Remember that? So that's their default backup argument. As the affidavit concedes, there are other contradictory interpretations of this. They call it zigzagging, and they admit that there was a hand recount, but it's all speculation. Now let's talk about the missing images. Now, without explaining what a ballot image is or its significance, or establishing that missing ballot images are evidence of a criminal offense, the affidavit says that one witness did research on the elections. They reviewed images of absentee voter ballots. Though the informant's veracity are all highly relevant, they're just attacking the witnesses now. Witness 1 is a chemical engineer, no formal role. Okay. The affidavit states that witness 1 discovered a number of ballot images did not reconcile. Then he filed a complaint. He said, we're missing 17,000 ballots. They say the SEB, the state election board, investigated that complaint, didn't identify any fact finding, and indicates there was a reprimand to Fulton County and a contemplated memorandum of understanding between the Georgia Secretary of State and others. And remember that, right? This deal that they were trying to work out, don't investigate the prior election. Let's just enter an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. Let's settle this. And then in our settlement, we'll do better next time. Well, you can monitor 24, okay? But just don't go look back at 2020. Another one is witness 2, another Republican member of the board, obstetrician, shout out. Joined the board, had not worked in the election, so it's attacking the witnesses. While reviewing the images, she saw a note, and she says there's miscounts. There's only 15,000 ballot images, short of 17,000 by 2,310 votes. We don't know who Vince is or how this allegation even impacted the election. So again, the standard is, and just to be clear, in the original affidavit, they were explaining that a violation of the law is a misdemeanor. Okay, if you're violating this provision of the law, 20701, it requires officers to retain elections for 22 months. Makes it a crime to knowingly and willfully deprive somebody of a fair and impartially conducted election. In other words, these statutes don't say that the crime is only a crime if it changed the outcome of the election. It's not the law. It's not the standard. That's not a crime. I mean, in other words, it still can be a crime, even if it doesn't change the outcome of the election. So once again, they're perverting the actual law. The law doesn't require that. Impacted the election. It's not the standard. So despite her lack of training and having no experience, she says that there were also no SHA files, the secure hash algorithm. You have a ballot image. You have a file that validates that image. If you manipulate the image, the file that validates the image doesn't match anymore. It shows a change occurred. She noticed several things. She noticed that the files were missing. And despite her lack of expertise, she opined, again, just attacking the witnesses. And you can make an attack on the credibility, but it doesn't undermine the allegations, right? It could, but a judge can listen to them, witness 2 plus witness 3 plus witness 4, and say, all right, there's enough of a pattern here. The totality of the circumstances shows maybe there is a fair probability that something's going on. Based on that, she said this was a red flag, and this was manipulated after the election occurred, all the way back in January 11, 2024, which again extends the statute of limitations, which apparently they're missing here. Witness 3 is another board member of SEB. Confirmed, yep, there's ballot images missing. But her information about the 2020 election is not firsthand. And so she asserted a remedy. She wants a hand recount. There's another witness, number 4, Director of Elections for the Secretary of State. He said he's not aware of any discrepancies. I don't know. What are you talking about? He said that the images are just duplicates, right? And we don't even need to have ballot images. Who cares about the images? We got the final numbers. Joe Biden won. That's good enough for us. And that it would be more concerning if there was a discrepancy between the physical ballots and the voter count. So as long as they match, then we're good. The problem is we want to make sure the ballots match the votes in the images, that the paper matches the scanned version of it. That's why you use the machines. Moreover, he identified a possible explanation. Okay, he goes through, and it's amazing. It's good enough for them to just say, well, maybe this happened. Possibly this, possibly that. We're just idiots. We're just a mistake. Saying, oh, possibly they were stored on a memory card and it was not uploaded correctly, or it became corrupt. Lots of things are all corrupt all the time. Where an office, saying, lastly, the affidavit says that in a civil action that they admitted that they didn't preserve the majority of the ballot images. But in 2020, this is another point of contention. They say in 2020, however, preservation of ballot images was not required by Georgia law. Okay, so we can just shred them all. Nor do ballot images seem to be covered under this section of the law. They're not records that are even related to voting in an election. But that's not what our friend Kevin Moncla has to say. Shout out to Kevin Moncla. People are responding saying, hey, wait a minute. Fulton County in Georgia law, they never required any actual scanned ballot images be kept. Okay, that's the argument, that we don't have to save them. Kevin Moncla says, give me a break. He says, no, sir. In 2020, actually, both state and federal law requires ballot images to be preserved back in 2020. It's called OCGA 21-2-500C, and it's these provisions of U.S. Code. If that were not enough and somehow unclear, if you can't read the statutes on their face, the Secretary of State, as the chair of the state election board, adopted another rule. You've got statutes, then you've got interpretation of the statutes in rules. And so the rule was imposed on January 23rd, 2020, making it crystal clear that we're saving the ballot images. So the Secretary of State, the chair of the state election board, read the law, read Georgia law, read U.S. Code, and said, yeah, this is what the law says, and this is what we need to do. January 23rd, it becomes clear, and effective February 12, 2020. Here is the quote. After tabulating and consolidating the results, the election superintendent, this is the rule on the books for the election, shall prepare an election file, which shall contain a copy of the information contained on each memory card, which shall include all ballot images as well. And see that right there? Oh, right in the rule. As well as vote totals and a copy of the consolidated returns from the election management system. Further, the electronic file shall be stored on a secure medium placed in a sealed envelope or container and shall become a part of the election materials, which shall be deposited with the clerk of the Superior Court. It's their files, along with the signed results tape, along with paper ballots given to the clerk of the Superior Court. That's the rule. Now, they're going to go back to the statutes and say, well, that rule's bad. We disagree. We interpret that differently. That's not what the Secretary of State and the chair of the election board said for this election. You did not follow the rules. Any remaining doubt, says Kevin Moncla, who's amazing, should be put to rest with the amicus brief filed by the current general counsel called Charlene McGowan on behalf of the Secretary of State in a separate case. Okay, lots of litigation in Georgia. So somebody says, Charlene McGowan submits a brief, and we'll read that in a second. But he says, ballots are then scanned through optical voting scanners selected and furnished by the state of Georgia so that we can save the images. Once scanned, an electronic ballot image is created and stored on a memory card. Ballot images Following the election, county officials must deliver all ballots and ballot images in sealed containers to the clerk of the Superior Court. And those ballots and ballot images are to be held under seal for a period of 24 months. So 24 months, of course, was extended because of all the litigation. People were suing. The courts kept saying, don't delete the files. All right. They're going to delete them. They were like racing to delete them. And they said, you can't. Now, here's the signature page of that filing. And this was submitted, as we can see, April 2nd, 2021, when Charlene McGowan, the Assistant Attorney General, submitted a signature page in that filing in which Charlene establishes, once again, ballot images were in fact required to be preserved. She said this, signing on behalf of the AG, Chris Carr, who just got the message from Julie Adams to go investigate the fraudulent lawsuit that's been filed here. She said this, based on the controlling law described above, the Secretary respectfully requests that petitioners' motion to unseal be granted only as to the ballot images, and their request to inspect and scan the ballots be denied. Why? Because these results are consistent with Georgia law, allows them to access, to inspect the images, while maintaining confidentiality, security, and the integrity of the ballots that Georgia law requires. Georgia law requires it, and the voting public expects. Why would you not preserve the ballots? Why do we have scanning machines in the first place? So the Georgia officials called Charlene McGowan even confirmed that the law requires access to the ballots that should be scanned as images and saved. And in addition to that, somebody's modifying the ballots according to a key witness. So when they come in their arguments and they say we're not required to do that, and they're just duplicates, that's not the rule. That's not the law that was in place. They're liars. The affidavit fails to establish it and blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't. It shows exactly what the rules were. Now, likewise, they say, moving on. There were duplicated ballots. We saw that. You scan the ballots. There are some images, and you see the coffee stain. You see the errant marks. You see somebody voting for George Washington for Fulton County DA. And this duplicate ballot theory, they say, it's not probable cause. So what if there's multiple votes all scanned in there? It's entirely predicated on data analysis who reviewed a bunch of data. And he says, I don't even know where he got the data. He got it from Zebra Duck, wherever that came from. So the data is secondhand, and so it's all problematic. And although he believed the data was from an open records request, he wasn't positive. And so since we don't have a proper chain of custody of the files, that witness should be invalidated. He told the affiant, the witness told the FBI agent that he analyzed the data and he discovered that there were missing ballot images. Then from that, he concluded that though the affidavit does not explain how, the duplicated ballots were included in the original count. And even assuming that he worked with an accurate data set, which they're not alleging, nothing corroborates his statement. He even qualifies his speculation. He said it could be intentional, but not partisan, since the purported error added votes for Donald Trump. Yeah, but it was at 40%. Yeah, Trump got an actual, it wasn't 100% for the other candidate, Joe Biden. It was like 60-40. So Trump's numbers did go up because it would look ridiculous if you scanned 17,000 ballots and they were all in favor of Joe. So the fraud was, kind of fair. And we see this every election, right? It's coming in, it's like 60-40%, someone's going to win. We go, oh gosh. So in order for the person who's losing, who's in 40% right now, to win the election, he's got to, the returns need to come in at like 60% for him to close the gap and make it a winnable election. So yeah, Trump got some additional votes, but Biden got more. Notably, the affidavit concedes that a former Secretary of State investigator looked at these issues and said it's not intentional. No, of course not. Nothing is ever intentional. It's like fraud, but it's just mistake. And you're just a bad person if you think, well, that's kind of ridiculous. How can one county be so corrupt, idiotic, that this mistake happens repeatedly over and over and over again? Now, they said if this did happen, okay, this is where they just keep defaulting back to. If it happened, it was due to human error. Oh, no. Just morons. We also then saw the absentee ballots that were completely pristine, not folded. They were absentees, should have been in the mail, should have had a mail out, a sign, an opening, an unpacking, filling out the ballot, folding it back up, completing it, putting it back on an envelope, then sending it back in the mail. You've got 2 transportations, and you're going to have evidence of travel in that file. The affidavit, though, talks about this. Said there was potential misconduct involving these pristine ballots. No specific crime occurred, they say, or there are no allegations of that. Now, the theory involves the absentee ballots. They must be returned by mail or drop box, and so they must be folded into the envelope. A pristine ballot, on the other hand, has no indication it's been folded at all. Now, based on a hodgepodge, okay, all this language like smorgasbord and hodgepodge and all these things, it's language meant to, subtly undermine all of the evidence. Okay, it's a bundle of evidence, like a dozen witnesses all explaining it. He says it's a hodgepodge of witnesses, 1, 3, 8, 9, and 11. Sounds like a lot of people all agree this is a fraud. The affidavit implies something was amiss. Witness 8 was a poll worker, says she got a batch of 110 ballots, but those ballots looked different. She says 107 were unfolded. They were labeled as absentee ballots, and they were too clean to be absentee ballots, in her opinion. She claimed that 60 ballots came from a senior center. They should have been folded. They were not. She also complained to the board that extra ballots were introduced during the counting of absentee ballots. The affidavit, they say, omits the findings related to the complaint and the outcome of this investigation. And even the witness here is not alleging misconduct, but just opined that there is no reason to have pristine ballots without any folds. Witness 9, another one, saw 2 women from the FBRE re-voting ballots, and the director said that they were having to re-vote because the original ballot was not being accepted by the machine. Yeah. Another witness, a poll worker who was there. All of these people observing things and contributing to the final determination that there's a fair probability of evidence of a crime. She said that while she was doing logic and accuracy testing, she saw individuals printing random ballots that were stacks of paper to use as test ballots that were all unsecured. And that certain ballots, she believes, were actual voted ballots. They were removed from the machines and the duplicates were inserted. And they were unattended for a period of time before they were gathered in the cases. So they write, just juxtaposed with those confusing snippets, not very confusing to us, and 2 statements by other officials, they refute this. Another investigator for the Secretary of State since 2009 said that he did not know how a person could possibly inject fraudulent ballots into the process. He says, how could that happen? I have no idea. Witness 6 also explained that there were not extra ballots sticking around, and any attempt to sneak in the ballots would be evident by a discrepancy between the number of ballots and the number of people who voted. Yeah, okay. That's missing the entire point. Yeah, they want those numbers to reconcile. Got that. The problem is, who is on the ballots as being voted for? Yeah, they want the number of votes to match the number of ballots. That's true. The problem is that the ballots don't actually reflect the will of the voters, which is why they had to double and triple scan things. Now, to that end, the affiant concedes the Secretary of State also counted Fulton County ballots, and the counts matched. Witness 4 said that any difficulties of any attempt to tamper with the ballots was technically possible, of course, to change a vote if someone got a hold of a blank ballot. But that person said, I don't think it's technically feasible. In other words, none of the witnesses overcome witness 4's statements that this is improbable, right? They think it's improbable, and that's fine. They can think it is improbable, but that is the standard. Is there a fair probability? The judge said, yeah, there was. And all these witnesses in totality contribute to that. Now, without providing any more detail, and again, they don't have to do that, right? This is just a search warrant. This is not a criminal trial. They don't have to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a fair probability. You think it's improbable, but all the other evidence says there is a fair probability. So it's a disagreement. Doesn't mean the warrant is invalid. You're going to have your arguments and when you get charged to defend yourself against that. But that doesn't invalidate the warrant. Without any context, which they are not required to give you all the details, you'll have that as this litigation progresses and charges come down. The affidavit states on the day of the deadline to report the results, Fulton County reported a recount of 511,000 ballots. Fulton County came out, gave us a number. It was 17,000 ballots fewer than the original count. Margin of error, 11,900. The following day, they said, oh crap. They then reported 527,000 ballots to fill the gap. Now, the affiant does not explain where he got these figures or where Fulton County allegedly reported them. And although the FBI agent describes this deficiency or defect, there's no further discussion anywhere about this. And he relies on 11 witnesses, which is a lot, to support these various propositions, but he doesn't have a single witness that shows how this happened explicitly. You'll learn more about that. Now, the tabulator tapes, we continue. The FBI says, unsuccessfully, they say, tries to reframe these unsigned tabulator tapes as evidence of a crime. Because the law says you're supposed to confirm at the beginning of the count and at the end of the count who did what to make sure that it's legitimate and you have a witness to sign off on the chain of custody for the votes. Witness 6 is another investigator who received and investigated multiple complaints. He explained that tabulator tapes are specific to particular ballot scans and that ballots are scanned using a different machine during recounts. Thus, a recount generates new tabulator tapes, and in any event, they don't even matter, okay? The ballots are what matter. Again, it's like admitting that you don't care about the rules. Witness 6 said all ballots were accounted for during the risk limiting audit, and although Georgia rules and regulations do require tabulator tapes be signed, thank you for admitting that, by the poll manager and 2 witnesses, Brad Raffensperger, who's now running for governor. I've got a clip of him coming up. Wait. He stated that improper signatures on some tabulator tapes. Oh, another oversight, another administrative oversight. Wow. Mistake, 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 mistake. None of the rules are being followed. Even the lawsuit is not following proper open meeting rules and having a proper vote. All just oversight and mistakes, conveniently going in favor of their preferred candidate. Now, despite these findings, the affidavit also is relying on witness 3. She says that the tabulator tape is the holy grail for a final ballot count. Also relies on Clay Parikh. Shout out to Clay Parikh, man, smart dude, who believes that some tabulator tapes were missing and others showed evidence of an opportunity, they say again, an opportunity for a tabulator to be tampered with. But that's just speculation. He's saying someone may have manipulated this. And the poll closing time and report printed times on several closing tabulators were close enough in time. And for some unexplained reason, Parikh also believes that this showed memory cards were moved from the original tabulator and put in another tabulator to print out the tapes. But how, they say, does that show a crime? How does that show a crime? So all of that fails to explain the significance of any of these irregularities. So what if there's irregularities? There's no intentional cause here for these purported irregularities. These are all just speculative. And there are multiple exculpatory statements that this, once again, is just normal human error. It's pretty wild. They have 37 pages explaining just administrative problems and normal human error, almost like it's all intentional. These factors considered together say there is no probable cause and you should have never granted a warrant. Now, even if the 4 corners of the affidavit do establish probable cause, as the judge found, the seizure is unconstitutional because in the warrant, they didn't tell you about clear facts. They failed to include facts that show that this is legitimate. Bunch of case law saying if the warrant is, fraudulent, then the warrant should be quashed. And this is reckless in this warrant. In fact, there are false statements that are being made to this court. There are material omissions about well-documented, innocuous explanations for every one of these fraudulent activities, for the occurrences that he portrays as unresolved and nefarious. He says, we can explain all of it. We're just idiots over here. Then he continues. He says he tries to establish probable cause and tells us Fulton County never admitted to any impropriety. We know, because if they did admit to impropriety, then they might go to jail. Although the county has acknowledged and since rectified causes of innocent errors or inefficiencies, it has consistently rejected the notion that any errors resulted from impropriety. Why would you admit to the crime? So the statement is false. It casts a cloud of unsubstantiated criminal intent over this and these other allegations. Now, in depicting the mere existence of pristine ballots, he calls that nefarious. This could be just very explainable. This guy who worked for Katie Hobbs and got her installed as governor, Ryan Macias, says, oh yeah, there's all sorts of explanations for this. And the FBI agent failed to disclose that the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, thoroughly investigated the concerns about pristine ballots. And he didn't include that in the affidavit to the judge. So he was being dishonest that Brad Raffensperger, a lying hack in my opinion, confirmed this was all perfect. Of course, he's the Secretary of State running the elections. So the affidavit relies on one witness's recollection. She says, I saw pristine ballots, and that one person is not enough. There's a simple explanation for this. Military and overseas voters receive ballots and print them on normal paper, not ballot stock. And because election machines can't scan normal paper, they then transcribe them. And the ballot stock is not folded. So they just copy and paste them to new ballots. Those new ballots are pristine. That's all. It's innocuous. It's a common sense explanation, and they can make that defense once they're charged. Now, even more troubling, the affidavit fails to disclose that Brad Raffensperger investigated this. He said there's no support for this. No mention of their official report by their rigged election individuals. And so they say he should have included that. Therefore, this warrant's invalid. And also missing ballots. Now, the affidavit from the FBI puts forth a flagrantly misleading analysis, falsely implying the county manipulated its ballot count by uploading votes that arrived out of thin air after the official recount ended, padding the numbers so that they match. According to the affidavit, on the day of the deadline to report the recount results, Fulton County reported a recount totaling 511,000, 17,000 fewer. Following day, they then adjusted them. That distorts the truth. There's an explanation for this. As that report explains, the original deadline was this, and they were unable to finish scanning everything. There was a scanner programming error. Gosh, I should have started keeping a list of all these errors. Another one. Another error. Wow. Oh no. And they say, this is misleading. They can explain this away too. In truth, the number represents a running internal tally, a date on which was understood that it wasn't that they didn't report it. It's just that they weren't done counting them by the deadline. And so they omitted that. Just another error. Amazing. So the affidavit also talks about the tabulator tapes. They call that misleading, and they explain that away. It's important to note the purposes of the tape, okay? The tapes don't even matter. The tabulator tapes have no relevance to the official vote count. That's because Brad Raffensperger, he said, we don't care. The law says we have to do all of that, just to make sure that the elections are totally valid, but they're not relevant to the official count. Then why do we do it? Maybe you should just not have tapes at all. And you can just say whatever you think the final number is good enough. And nobody can backtrack the chain of custody for who actually did the counting. The report comes out and says, well, the purpose of the tapes is a backup to the memory cards, and they're not part of the process by which official results are reported. So it's like a DUI case, and I think our elections should at least be as standard as a DUI case. Could you imagine just getting a blood result? Like, man, you're drunk. What? No, I'm not. I didn't have anything to drink. Yes, the numbers say you did. Well, I need to see the actual analysis. Can I see that? It's not relevant, okay? Who cares what the gas chromatography machine says? Okay, no one cares. Just shut up. Here's the number. You're an alcoholic. Shut up. They are merely additional documentation, and we don't even need to keep them. The assumption that because tabulator tapes have not been produced, that the ballots are unaccounted for is incorrect. And so the affidavit omits that as well, is basically lying to the judge, is what they're arguing. Now, in addition, there's also other explanations for all of this. And he didn't disclose this. He didn't disclose the overwhelming biases or credibility issues plaguing the witnesses, as though Brad Raffensperger doesn't have a partisan bias to him. Given the source's reliability is highly relevant, they say these witnesses are bad. Saying Kurt Olson has been sanctioned for his unsubstantiated speculative claims, and you didn't tell him about that. In the Kerry Lake case, and he acted recklessly. Kerry Lake, that our election was completely rigged here as well. Kurt Olson is now being vindicated, thankfully. Same people were making these same determinations that Kurt Olson is misleading. Now we're seeing the truth. They also rely on witness 7. Oh, Kevin Moncla makes an appearance. Witness 7 was Kevin Moncla. Very smart dude. We appreciate him. But the affidavit fails to disclose that Moncla was reported to the FBI for sending threatening letters to the SEB and the Secretary of State, Brad, who's a big whiny baby who said, oh no, someone's investigating my fraud. Let me forward this over to the Biden FBI to go wage war on him, to shut him up and get him out of my hair. Nor does the affidavit rely on or reveal that it relies on Carrie Lake's election and other things, which was, again, fraudulent here. We all watched it. We had people standing outside of polling places because Bill Onesie Twosie Gates in our county in Maricopa was saying, oh, our another dumb mistake. Oops, another paper match error. So you had to shove your ballots in the back door before you could even get in to vote. Now, they say even if the warrant were supported by probable cause, it disregards state sovereignty, blah, blah, blah. We already covered that. That's this idea. The feds can't come in and encroach upon you. The seizure was unreasonable. Also, because of statute of limitations, they've all expired. No, they haven't. The fraud occurred in 2024 in January. Witness says that. And so that extends the statute. Fourth Amendment is talking about reasonableness. There's 5-year statute of limitations. This is about 2020. It's too old. There's nothing you can do about this. And it goes well beyond the 22-month window. We've held onto the files for a long time. We never needed to. The Younger abstention doctrine, we just read it. There are exceptions to that, of course. If your state is fraudulent, then you don't get to continue to wallow in your fraud. Not only does the government seizure functionally enjoin the state's proceedings, we have a constitutionally mandated role. Yeah, and so does the president to make sure elections are not fraudulent. Take care to execute the laws. When the respondent got the warrant and the original copies, they violated Georgia's rights. Yeah, you guys don't have a constitutional right to commit fraud. Sorry. Nothing in the law permits them to encroach upon our rights, and Congress permitted inspection only at the principal office of the custodian, the attorney general, blah, blah, blah. So you can't come in here and infringe upon our sovereign interest to safeguard election integrity. The problem is you're not doing that. You've got bias, and you've got, it sounds like you just had 37 pages admitting that the explanation for all of this are errors. All right. So you guys can't run your elections. Safeguarding election integrity. You just explained every single paragraph here that there's some human error, administrative error, files corrupted. So they say get out. So we satisfy the other requirements for relief, and so you should give us our files back. So for the reasons herein, we request that the court order the respondent to give us our files back. Order them to give us copies, all right? They also want the copies. So you might say, well, they've already got the files. They've had them for a month now. So what if they were ordered to give those files back? So what, they've still got the copies and evidence of crime? Nope, they want the court to give them the copies back. Any fruits of this illegal search warrant that they say is illegal should not be to their benefit, and it should all be returned, and nobody should be prosecuted. Order any relief that you think is appropriate. Look who is on this case. Dun, 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 dun. Abby Lowell, Democrat, hack lawyer extraordinaire, representing basically all of them. Don Lemon and the rest of them. And one of the biggest election riggers, in my opinion, in the whole world, called this guy, Norm Eisen. His law firm, Democracy Defenders Fund, probably responsible for rigging elections in various locations and now suing to get those files back. And this is a good attempt from them. I think it's a nice filing, much better than the last one before they had all their lawyers on board. But the fact is, it is an illegal lawsuit. It was never approved, as we saw from Julie Adams. They filed this lawsuit without proper votes in violation of Georgia open records laws, open meeting laws. And this is just what they do. They just chalk everything up to administrative error. I'm sure this was an administrative error. Oops, it was close enough. We, submitted it after and we got the votes by email and good enough. And Nadine says the clerk of the court is the actual custodian of the records. Once the election is over, it goes over to them. So they lose their possessory interest. But they brought out that Ryan Macias guy as their expert witness. He wrote a big fat affidavit, which is largely makes up the argument that we just read through. And we've got more to be revealed on this. So Jason Frazier is another investigator there in Georgia. He says, please join me tomorrow or watch online. We got a lot of cases to review. And he says, tomorrow there will be an election board meeting, February 18, 2026. They're going to be covering a lot of ground. He says, I'm on the agenda with this complaint for the remaining 2 people in this complaint. There were 2 Fulton County co-registrants, had 2 unique IDs each, and voter history showed credit for voting with each ID in November 2020. So 2 people, 2 ID numbers, both voted. So it sounds like 2 people times 2 IDs equals 4 votes, which is not appropriate because 1 person, 1 vote, not 2 people, 4 votes, which is 1 person, 2 votes. Equals 4 votes? How does that work? In the safest and most secure election in history. Wow. So background details, he says, I turned these IDs in as possible duplicate registrations. I reviewed the date last voted on the voter roll. All 4 IDs showed they voted, 11/3/2020. I checked the voter history file before they were merged. 3 absentee votes and 1 in-person votes. Now this is where it gets interesting. I checked the numbered list of voters, the official list of everyone that checked in to vote for election day. No votes for these IDs. Looked at the absentee voter file and only 1 ID requested a ballot and it showed it never returned. So things don't add up. Hard to say based on this data if these 2 people voted at all or if it was just made up by Fulton County. Dun, 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 dun. He sent this one 3/14/2022 as a complaint. I've attached the file including 11,780 voter registrations, all people with 2, 3, 4, or 5 registrations, all belonging to the same person. I understand that some of the people on the list may be cousins, twins, roommates, similar names, spouses, children, etc. However, if you scroll down my list, you will quickly see that the vast majority of them are clear duplicates with identical information or slight variations, like a middle initial, potential change last names after marriage, or obvious typos like the one I submitted initially. You will also find several 1900 birth year voters, along with their actual birth year duplicate. Worst example I found was this person called Trey Johnson. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 IDs, registered to vote 5 times Trey. 2 different birth years, 1997, 98, same address, 2 different cities, Atlanta and College Park. 2 different dates of registration, October 2018. 2 apartments listed in 2 different ways, C2 and apartment C2, all still active, never voted. Several of the other duplicates are both voting, which I hope you will see as an issue and a reason that this type of voter roll maintenance should be conducted on a regular basis. Clearly, duplicates of this magnitude start getting large enough to sway a close election. It was 11,900 votes, 800 votes. Lastly, I've been told, and other things, thanks for helping to improve Fulton County. So he'll be there tomorrow for the election hearing, and we're going to cover a lot of that, no doubt about it. I'm sure it's going to be juicy. So Just the News had on our friend Georgia State Senator called Greg Dolezal, who's doing awesome work on this. He says it's time to stop Fulton County from even running these elections at all.
John, I have called for the state to take over the Fulton County elections. We passed a law in 2021 that set the triggers in place for the state election board to take over the elections for a temporary period of time if a county proves they're incapable of following Georgia law. And if there's ever a county that's proven it, it's Fulton County.
Heck
Today,
yeah.
Fulton County has hundreds of people still on their voter rolls that were born in the year 1900. They have thousands of people registered to vote at illegal voting locations, parking lots, homeless shelters that have been closed for a decade, UPS stores, storage units. It is time for the state to step in before the 2026 general election to ensure that we can have a free and fair election.
We do want free and fair elections, and hopefully we get them soon. We'll have hearings on it tomorrow. But meanwhile, the Secretary of State, Brad for Georgia, is now out. And I guess he's running for governor now. As governor, I won't chase headlines and play politics. I'll put hardworking Georgians first and tell the truth every time. And this is the same pattern and practice. You get secretaries who then become governors after they rig the entire election system for themselves, just like Katie Hobbs did. just like Jocelyn Benson's going to try to do in Michigan. And it's happening all over the country. Brad's like, that's a great idea. Yeah, I'll definitely win, since I rigged it all.
Do you want someone to always tell you the truth?
Yeah, actually we do, but that's not you.
No matter how hard it is to hear? Real leadership means saying no sometimes. As your next governor, I will always stand for the truth. I will always stand for you, no matter what. Do you want someone to always tell you the truth, no matter how hard it is to hear?
That's your message? You have a 13-second video? Oh my gosh, pathetic. All right, so that's that. Now, meanwhile, we're not done with 2016 either. New subpoenas issued in the inquiry about the 2016 Russia election interference. AP now reporting this. I really want to get these documents. They're not out yet. But we're waiting for this one. John Brennan, the subject of this investigation. The DOJ now issuing new subpoenas in the Florida-based investigation into perceived adversaries of Trump. Who are adversaries of Trump. We watched what they did in their little Oval Office meeting with Obama, Clapper, Comey, Brennan, all saying, oh, the Russians are hacking our election. And they based that on the Hillary Clinton dossier, the campaign propaganda called the Steele dossier, that they shoved into a classified annex and then tried to shove down Congress's throat to justify the claims that the Russians did anything. All this now percolating, according to people, multiple people familiar with the matter, talking about the government response to Russian interference in 16, which was all made up by them. An initial wave of subpoenas in November asked recipients for documents related to the preparation of an ICA, which was fake, that detailed a sweeping multi-pronged effort by Moscow to help Trump defeat Hillary. All made up. Though the first subpoenas requested documents from the months surrounding January 17 publication of the ICA, the latest subpoenas seek any records from the years since then, said people on condition of anonymity to the AP to discuss this. DOJ declined to comment or release the subpoenas. The subpoenas reflected continued investigative activities into one of several inquiries the DOJ has taken. An array of former intelligence and law enforcement officials have also received subpoenas. Lawyers for CIA Director former John Brennan, liar, who helped oversee the drafting of the ICA, who has been called crooked as hell by Trump, true, have said that they have been informed he is a target, but has not been told of any, quote, legally justifiable basis for undertaking this investigation. Well, it's because you committed massive fraud from within the government and were involved in a conspiracy against the rights of the president and many others. And that guy belongs in jail. And we're going to be here until he is. Mike Lee, meanwhile, is explaining we have to fix our elections. Don't let anyone trick you into thinking that enforcing the talking filibuster to get this SAVE Act through is impossible or fraught with unmanageable risk. It's neither of those things. It takes time, but that's time well spent if it means we can ultimately pass the SAVE Act. Here is base Mike Lee in the House.
Enforcing the talking filibuster isn't hard. It's not mysterious. We haven't done it in a long time, but it's allowed by the rules. We don't have to break any rules to do it. We don't have to nuke anything. We just have to say, look, if you want to oppose the Save America Act, we're going to make you speak and explain why to the American people at some great length. This has been done in the past. It's one of the mechanisms used back in the 60s with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It helped eventually achieve the necessary degree of consensus to get that bill passed. It took a while, but after those who didn't want it to pass were required to speak about it, and the American people continued to support the legislation, it passed. Let's give this a shot.
We have to get it done. You can see our elections are completely rigged across the board. Rep. Anna Paulina Luna said, thank you, Senator Collins, surprised all of us, for being the 50th senator to sign on to the Save America Act. Now, Leader John Thune must end the filibuster and bring this to the floor. There is no better use of time for Congress than securing our elections while we still carry the majority. If we don't do it now, it will never happen. Here's Luna.
Look, I think right now America's made their voices very clear. They want voter ID, and I really will take a second to commend Senator Collins. She was the 50th representative to sign on to this, and this is a massive piece of legislation. So I'm going to be personally sending her 50 roses for Valentine's Day because she's America's Valentine's for that. But moving forward, look, Senator Thune has every ability to bring the standing filibuster to the floor. I know he famously came out maybe a few days ago and said that they might not have the time to do it. And I would actually argue that this is probably the number one thing, especially moving into the midterms. Many senators have said, well, if we do this, the Democrats are going to do this when they regain power. But the fact is, Maria, is that the Senate Democrats have made it very clear that they want mass amnesty. They want mass naturalization of illegals. And frankly, I think they're going to do it anyways. And so the only way to really secure our country for future generations is to ensure that Americans have faith in the voting process, and that if their senators work against their interests, that they can vote them out at the ballot box. And that's exactly what this will do. So I am frankly behind every senator that is for the voter ID. I think that Senator Fetterman will likely vote for it as well. Again, thank you to Senator Collins, but Thune needs to bring it to the floor, and it needs to happen immediately.
Got to get it done. Otherwise, the fraud will continue. So Fulton County now busted. You can see they got a lawsuit filed in violation of the board's own rules. Shall. They have to vote on these things in open meetings, in open forums. Can't do it by email. But like the election, they backfilled it. They are freaking out and scrambling to get these files back because they know they're busted. And now, my friends, it's time to hear from you. If you're just joining us, quick recap. We talked about this letter from Julie Adams over to the Attorney General of Georgia saying it's time for you to now investigate the Fulton County Board of Commissioners because they're violating Georgia statutes. Not allowed to do that. We went through, refreshed our recollection that Rob Pitts made the announcement and had not gotten the votes before he made the announcement that the lawsuit had been filed. Went through the affidavit. Reminded ourselves about Nadine Williams saying that the clerk of the court is actually the custodian of the records, not Fulton County commissioners. They're trying to say it's a subset. We'll see what the courts say as it relates to standing and whether Rob can get his files back. But then we went through in detail their arguments that they had a fair election and that all of the mistakes were just human error and administrative problems, and they don't matter anyways. So what if Georgia law says it? The tapes don't really even add anything to the conversation. Just accept our final outcome. Stop asking questions. We understood from our friend Kevin Moncla, who was one of the witnesses in the affidavit, that the rules said you had to have the ballots locked down. Ballot images. You can't just delete all the images. The rules said that. And the Charlene McGowan, the assistant AG, said that in court filings back at the time. They are perverting the probable cause standard. It's not guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a fair probability. There is a fair probability that they are criminals, as we've covered here multiple times. And we looked at all of the other various statutes and case law that they are using to try to get their files back and showed that they're misinterpreting them. We saw that our friend Jason Frazier will be there tomorrow to testify. We got Dolezal, who is in the House. Brad's running for governor. Gosh. Then we learned that Brennan is getting some new subpoenas. Base Mike Lee was here and Representative Luna all joining us. But now it's time to hear from you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us as we cover this stuff. Thanks for sharing this video, man, because a lot of people still don't understand the scale and the scope of the fraud that exists in our elections. And I know it's a little bit of a black pill to think, wow, it's a real disaster out there, but we got to vote still. And the more that we can expose this stuff, I think the better it will get for all of us. So thanks for sharing it. Thanks for liking it. Thanks for subscribing and all the things. And thanks for sending in these donos and supporting our work. Really grateful for you. Thank you for being here and making all this possible. We're grateful. We appreciate it. Ron Burgundy's here. What's going on? We got some nice donos that came in. And thank you, Muffin Rando, Donut Mind Me, John in the house, clipping for us. We got new babies joining us. Yes, indeed. It is Taco Tuesday. That's right. It is Taco Tuesday. I hadn't figured out what our dinner plans were. Taco sounds pretty good. Hey, Alex, I will. What's up, Alexa will. Welcome aboard. We had a great members only stream this morning. I mean, it was a good stream, but we talked about all the poop in the Potomac. And we talked about Eric Swalwell, Bang Bang Fang Fang Swalwell, his poetry. All right, but it was a good stream. We had a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us as a new member, Alex. Oh, I will. Deluxe Knight says, Washington State is officially following California. They just passed a 9.1, state income tax. They are not replacing the state sales tax either. I really wish I could move my farm now. Man, that's wild. So the exodus will continue. Many of these states are just going to fall, I think on their own weight of their liberalism. California is losing trillions of dollars of wealth. I think just, Google guys left, Zuckerberg left, Palantir left. They're all leaving. Deluxe Night. Hopefully that can be reversed soon. We appreciate our farmers, man. Thank you for growing our food. Hey, this old guy. Fulton County needs a major housekeeping. The grift and the nastiness runs deep there. Yeah, and they just don't follow the rules. It's unequivocal, according to a board member saying, shall. They said, may. Not how you run a government. Hey, Julianne Barry, thank you for being a membo. And thank you for gifting 5 more membos and bringing them in to join us. We've got Maui Redman, welcome. All gas, no brakes. Love it. Draknar, welcome. Renee's here. The Forgotten Ones, all gifted membos, courtesy of Julianne Barry. Thank you, Julianne. Very grateful to have you. Welcome, new membo friends. We'll have our members-only stream tomorrow morning. And hopefully we see you there. Hey, Murphy's Law, 9 months as a membo. Happy new baby to us, Murphy's Law. Grateful to have you here. I just passed 9 months as a member. That's full term, man. We've been through some stuff together. It's just going to get better and better the more babies we have. Thank you, Murphy's Law. I appreciate you joining us. This old guy. Would you buy a used car from this freak? No. I definitely wouldn't. But maybe he'll start selling them once he serves his prison term. Thank you, this old guy. Hey, lucky number 2305. Thanks, Rob, for all the juicy news. Yeah, today felt like a good one. Thank you for that. And we had, some good documents and some good rebuttals. I think we had some good developments today. And really, we thank Julie Adams and the people who are keeping their eye on this. We're just standing on the shoulders of the Monclas and the Fraziers and the Julie Adams, just trying to interpret it here. So all credit to them. 17 months as a membo. Thank you for that. That's almost 2 full babies, pretty sure. Carry the 1. Thank you for that. Lucky number 7. Yeah, interesting day. Flight 93. May they rest in peace. 9/11 Scholar, what's going on? Hey, appreciate your work. Ask questions, get answers. 9/11 as the dono. 9/11. Thank you for that, 9/11. Yeah, still a lot of questions about that, isn't there? Thank you, 9/11 Scholar. Really appreciate that. Ask questions, get answers. We got to stay on it. These are our elections. Are we going to govern ourselves, or are we going to be governed by fraudsters? Doan, does treason enter the pick when election fraud includes hostile foreign entities like Venezuela and political factions in Serbia, among others? Yeah, I would think so. I would think if you got evidence of that, if you are an election official and you're conspiring with a foreign power to rig elections, yeah, that's treasonous. And John Brennan may be in that mix. And I also think, I don't know if it amounts to treason, but like trying to blame Russia and then go to war with Russia so that you can win an election is the most detestable thing you could ever possibly imagine. Like, how dare you smear an entire country because you hate Trump to win for Hillary? And then you want to, the whole operation is in furtherance of Russia's this big giant boogeyman, right? And they rigged our elections. And then it's all just pre-suading people into now, wanting to support war. It's really disgusting. Thank you, Don. And they're supposed to not do that. They're the CIA, right? Supposed to be working for America, not for the Democratic Party. Dark Rogue says a ballot is not a vote. It is the currency used to represent a person's vote, right? Ballots don't vote, people vote. This is why voter verification and ballot verification is necessary. Yeah, exactly. And it's such a smart point, Dark Rogue, because they just defer and default back to the ballots constantly. You saw it in their response. So what? It's about the ballots. We just need the numbers. No, it's about actually what's on the ballots and the person who wrote that ballot and submitted that as an extension of them. And it's their voice in self-governance. So to say the tapes don't matter, or it's an administrative error, or something got corrupted, or so what if we didn't follow the rules, it didn't change the outcome of the election. All of that is to just basically dissipate your share of governance. And so what if there's multiple ballots? Well, so what? That means that my vote counted for half. If somebody gets 2 votes, I get 1. My vote is half of their vote. So it undermines our entire, structure of government. And for them to be so flippant with it, like, oh, it's just a mistake, shut up, doesn't matter, shows you how detestable they really are. And now he's going to run for governor. He shouldn't run for dog catcher. Thank you for that, Dark Rogue. Dark Rogue, hey, remember that anti-ICE doc that spoke of playing stupid in your obstruction of ICE? Fulton County took it to the next level. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like, intentional obstruction for the ICE people, but not rising to the level of obstruction. It's kind of like, I'm just a dumb protester kind of a thing. You want to get in their faces, blow your whistles, stand in their way to escalate the tension around them, but not cross the threshold of criminality. And then it's all decentralized. So you have like 1,000 people doing this constantly. It's hard to pin one person on being an obstructionist, but when you bundle it up all together, it's clearly an insurgency that's working to stop the federal agents. Same thing with Fulton. It's decentralized, so it's hard to pin it on anybody. And then that's their defense. You can't point to anybody. Is it Brad? Is it the Inspector General? Is it Vic Reynolds, GBI? Is it the election poll workers? You can't identify them because it's, by design, unidentifiable. It's in the chaos of the election. Psychological projectionist says, I can make improbable things happen deliberately. Yeah, and it's like intentional negligence. And then when you find out about the negligence, they drop the intention behind it and they just say, oops, sorry. And if you continue intentionally and all your negligence adds up to criminal actions, you're still a criminal. But no, it's just a mistake. It's just an error. It's just an oversight. So don't get mad at me. Hey, what's up, Hillary Clinton, Dark Rogue? As you read the Fulton County legal documents, I expected Hillary to pop up at any moment with, at what point, what difference does it make? From Hillary, when she was screaming about the dead Americans who got killed on her watch. Yeah, Dark Rogue, that's exactly what their argument is. So what? Didn't change the outcome of the election. You don't need the tapes. They don't do anything. You already got the ballots. Well, we want to make sure the ballots are the actual ballots of the voter. And we use the tapes and we use the images to confirm that. You don't need to. Just trust us. We followed the rules. No, you don't. You just filed a lawsuit. Not following the rules. Good comment. Mark, what about other races on those ballots? They were fraudulent as well. Well, yeah. And then if the system continues on as it continued, then you get Ossoff and Raphael Warnock as the new senators on the most safe and secure election platform in American history. That, of course, appears to be riddled with fraud. And again, if you have to spend 37 pages explaining all of these mistakes and oversights, doesn't that kind of indicate that there's a real big problem there? Thank you, Mark. What's up, Chubby? So what we need as Congress to do is change election fraud to treason and thus remove the statute of limitations. Unfortunately, we have a do-nothing, feckless GOP-controlled House and Senate. That is true. It would be nice if the Republicans in Congress really did anything, honestly, like anything. I'd be like, wow, they passed something interesting. Wow, that's great. But don't hold your breath, Chubby. Thank you for the comment. Hey, NY, do we have an Abby Lowell Barr complaint for improperly representing a client that he is not properly authorized to represent, which is Fulton County? I can remember pretty harsh punishment for lawyers who were not properly authorized to represent a party in federal court. Problem is, the legal institution is filled with libs. So you've got, like the ABA, the ACLU, you've got the law schools are just lib as can be, basically communist. And many of the law firms are completely libbed out. And I had a lot of, this like in my practice years. I'm like, these people are disgusting. Part of the reason I'm happy not to practice anymore. I don't want to hang out with those people. But I can remember pretty harsh punishment for them. So yeah, this like the 65 Project, they were disbarring lawyers. We've got many of them, Jeff Clark and many others who've had to fight this battle indefinitely. Shout out to them. But no, if you're a lib lawyer and you're a hatchet man, you get a gig on cable news as a legal analyst, or you leave the DOJ And then you get a job at a big law firm and get paid even more money for being a hatchet man for doing their bidding. They have a whole team. They develop the lawyers in law school, brainwash them. They go out to practice. They shove them in the DOJ. They shove them in the courts. They become these judges and prosecutors. They hack away on behalf of the liberal party. Then when they leave the government, they go get cushy jobs somewhere and are celebrated as heroes. It's like a whole recruitment cycle, and we don't have that on our side. So Abby Lowell can just, operate with essentially impunity, and it's not good. We need to develop our legal bench and our entire, cyclical team. Villa Plot, what's up? Hey, happy Mardi Gras watchers. Today's Mardi Gras? Happy Mardi Gras, y'all. Everywhere else, it's just Tuesday. Well, that looks like a very festive wreath or something. Villa Plot, happy Mardi Gras, my man. Thank you for being a membo on Locals. Oh, Biltong is here. Did you know that Biltong is one of the highest protein snacks in the world, boasting more than 50% protein, packed with B vitamins, creatine, iron, zinc, and more. Go to BiltongUSA.com. Use code Robert. You'll save 10% off. Thank you, Biltong. Good to see you out there, my man. Hopefully that Biltong is flying off the shelves. Hey, Ron 4T. What's up, Ron? Thanks for being a member over on Rumble. Amazing to see you over there. Rat's Asperger is a moron. Sealing certifying election products with a signature is crucial when a contested election requires an audit to ensure evidence is not added or removed. Yeah, it's to validate. Like, why do you have the rules, Brad? Why do you have tabulator tapes? Why do you have rules that are even admitted by your own office, essentially, the AG's office, let's say, that you got to keep the images? What's the point? Well, it's to validate it. The fact that they just say ignore it means, to me, that they know it's fraud and they don't want you to look at those numbers, which is why they're very, very panicky the DOJ has those files. Hey, what's this fella? Oh, is that the guy from Star Wars? And Peter Griffin. Rancor, what are you doing here? I don't know. Probably trying to eat somebody. One old guy. Fulton County Chairman Rob Pitts still looks like the massive reptilian creature in the pit beneath Jabba the Hutt. That's what it is. The throne room in Return of the Jedi is a Rancor named Patissa. Yeah, and you kind of feel bad for that little fella. Once he gets the door dropped on his head and he kind of whimpers like a little puppy. He's like, like, oh, he just wanted to play. That's all. Probably. Maybe eat somebody. Fulton County Chairman. Yeah, he kind of does look like that, doesn't he? Yeah, it's true. That's true. Good to see you, one old guy. Thank you for that. Hey, what's up? This old guy. Talking filibusters are measured in hours, not days. Let's get the thing started. Yeah, let's just go. Let's go. And they can explain to themselves why they are in opposition to like 70% of the American public who wants ID at polls. Hey, what's up? Backdoor Dugan verdict is still not recorded on the record. What? Like the verdict sheet? I think she's appealing it, right? Smooth Brain Crypto. We haven't looked at that case in a while. Yeah, Backdoor Dugan got convicted, right? And now she's appealing it, I think. Going to fight. And she resigned from her judgeship. Yeah, we maybe want to check back in on that. Good to see you, this old guy. Thank you, Smooth Brain Crypto, for the dono. Hey, McElravy says Fulton County needs to be broken up. Yeah, I don't know really what the answer is there. And many of them are in favor of like what the county commissioner is doing. They love Fannyland. They just, re-elected her. Scott McAfee got re-elected. The whole thing is just one big incestuous fraud entity. Backdoor Dugan should have had this charge for backdoor use of a courthouse. Wisconsin Law 944.33. Look up the law. Man, one old guy. Thank you for the very nice dono. Well, those were federal charges, right? So Wisconsin law, I don't think Wisconsin would have prosecuted her because she was their judge. So like any other sanctuary city in which she was operating, where was that? I forget what town that was. But yeah, they're not going to go after their own, which is why it needed to be a federal prosecution so that actual justice could be meted out. Thank you, one old guy. Hey, and thank you for the nice dono, one old guy. Very generous. Hey, John Allen. Hi, Rob. What's up, John? Good to see you. This is the first time I've caught you live. Well, with enough time to dono, lol. Yes, since you made your announcement about your new addition to the family. The new baby in the house coming soon. We've got some appointments, I think, next week. She's, there's a baby in there for sure. She looks as beautiful as ever, but there's definitely a baby in there. And we're going to go, I think we've got ultrasounds like next week on Monday, and might see the baby's face or something. Congratulations. You deserve it, as both you and Alexis are truly amazing people. She for sure. Definitely her. I don't know about me. That's debatable. God bless you both. God bless you, John. And this new one on the way. Here's something for the college fund or the diaper fund, whichever you prefer. Love you, brother. Thank you, John. Super nice of you. Thank you for doing that. Good to see you again. And thanks for saying hello since you're here. But yeah, probably diaper fund. I don't think we're sending our kid to college. If we want actual intelligence. Hey, Lou, just college, there's some good colleges. You can learn a lot and do some things. Anyways, I went to college, but I went to ASU. Anyways, Les Bon Temp Roulet. Les Bon Temp Roulet. Man, I don't even know what that is. It sounds like French to me. Les Bon Pain Roulet. I don't even know what that is. Lou, thank you for the dono, though. That was from this morning, though. Amazing, amazing. Oh, King of Biltong. Thank you, King of Biltong. Hey, please check your email. We need a new address. I'm eating your biltong. Thank you, King of Biltong. Yeah, so we have this place that we really like in DC, and they said tentatively, we've been emailing back and forth, and she's like, no, you should plan on an early March move-in, right? Early March move-in. But we don't have a lease signed or anything like that. So we don't actually have an official address. Milwaukee County. It was Milwaukee County. Is that right, C. Reed? Thank you. King of Biltong. Thank you, King of Biltong. You're eating my biltong? No. Hey, what's going on? Ron 4T. What's up? Hey, one more thing to Ratzenberger. Without a chain of custody, none of the ballots should be included in a recount. Literally zero and nada. 100%. Yeah, if you didn't have a chain of custody in your DUI result, blood result goes bye-bye. And I've actually done cases like that and gotten blood thrown out because the chain of custody is problematic. Cop A to Cop B to Cop C. Cop B disappears. Now you don't have a chain from Cop A to C. B is missing. Blood is gone. So why are our elections not at least operational to the same standard as criminal law, right? It's our governance. In fact, the winner of the election gets to decide the criminal law. Hey, Jake, my message is on locals. It was over the allowed legal 500 characters allowed by locals. Amazing. So we'll take a look at that. We're going to come to the locals comments right now. It's Jake from Oxford. Super smart. Can't wait to read it. Leonard, 20 months as a membo. How can Democrats lie about everything all the time? I don't know. Maybe it's the George Costanza defense. It's not a lie if you believe it. I think there's some of that. Many of them are just brainwashed into oblivion. Many of them, I think, are corralled into their belief structure based on their social conditioning and their social, in-group status. If you want to be in the group, you have to believe a certain way. And I think that's very prevalent in our society. In large part, it's the same COVID psychopaths. It's the same insurrection psychopaths. It's the same Russian stole our election psychopaths. They're just all kind of nuts. And if you want to be in that friend group, we were talking about this morning, actually. Somebody said that they're a good friend or family member is losing friends because their libs are like, who did you vote for? And I think America's going to get more tribal, honestly, as the days go by. And if you're not in a tribe, you're going to be in one soon. Depends on which one you're going to be in. But in order for them to be in that group, they have to believe the same things. And I don't think that our party and our ideology is exactly like that. They call Trump, Trumpist, cultists, and all the things. But just look at the party in terms of governance. There's divisions all over the place. Versus the libs, they go in, they get their talking points, they just recite them, and they have strength in numbers, and they protect themselves because they're all in the in group. So they lie to support that, and they're also communist, and many communists Communist morality is not akin to Western morality. And, if you look into it, they can basically do whatever they want because there is no a basis in Christianity or something. Like, where does their moral framework come from? From winning. So they can do whatever they want. I don't even think they think it's lies. They just think it's, beating the evil institutions that are, I don't even know evil's right, but beating the institutions that they think are oppressive. It's a sickness. Michael Savage said liberalism is a mental disorder. It's true. Rob, what difference at this point does it make? Remember that song? Someone committed a crime. So you're saying we just let the murderers and child PDF files go unpunished? I'm not saying that. I don't think I've ever said that. But maybe you're making a quote from like Hillary. Someone did commit a crime, so you're saying we just let murderers and child PDF files go unpunished. No, that's not our position here at all. But I'm sure you're talking about somebody else. Who's this? Afternoon Eleanor. Oh my gosh, Eleanor. Eleanor Schoonover. Look at the size of this dono. Whew, that's a big one. Eleanor, thank you so much for that. Says, thought I was members, may need help, family, and self would be so far behind if not for your tutoring. God bless and care for you and wife and baby. Thank you every day. Eleanor, thank you. My goodness, that is a major one. Thank you so much for sending that. Extremely generous. May need help. Family and self would be so far behind if not for your tutoring. Man, God bless and take care of you and your wife and baby, and thank you every day. Eleanor, amazing. If you do need help, like if there's something I can help with, of course, send me an email, robert@spotlightlawyer.com. But really, really nice and generous. Really grateful to have you here, Eleanor. And I know you've sent some big ones, historically speaking. So once again, thank you for supporting our work, making it possible. We don't have billionaire funding here. We are funded by you and your support. So we're really grateful for that, Eleanor. Thank you for that's a big one. We appreciate that a lot. Eleanor Schoonover in the house. Yeah. Really, really nice of you. I don't even know what to say, but I love you. Thank you. We got this one. Eddie Hernandez translating for us. Less to allow, less bon temp, the good times roll. Oh, that's French. Eddie Hernandez. You speak French? Les bon temp, rolle. Let the good times roll, baby. Thank you, Eddie Hernandez. And Eleanor, thank you again. Hey, DC Metro, 20 members. DC Metro, amazing. 20 new members coming in. We're going to have a great members only stream tomorrow morning. We had a great one this morning as well. So check that out if you're looking for more content and other news to dig into. Scott from South Carolina. What's up, Gate Watcher? We got BFM. TH8 is here. Jill Kelly. What's up, Danielle? Chase. Chimo J. What's up, Publia Zero? We got Chasing Zero. Mr. Buddyman. Jules Bulls. Mike Chaput. Baxter Blue. What's up, Valentino? We got Larry Putt, Melissa Morgan, Scott A. Wynn is here, and Maury Kendi, all gifted membos in the house, courtesy of DC Metro. Thank you, DC Metro, for that. And for bringing them in, and for being a membo, DC Metro. You rock. Thank you for doing that. Oh, yeah, that's the DC Metro. Should be there in a couple weeks, if they'll send us the lease. John Allen. Okay, just so it'll be known, haven't missed a stream yet. John, since I started back in 2020. I may not catch you live, but I always watch every stream. Yeah, I don't have a life, LOL. John, man, that is such an honor, brother. I appreciate that. I really do. And yeah, I really do. That's a major thing. We get to spend time together, and I really appreciate that. And I remember that, man. When I was like doing construction and stuff, I would catch every Rush Limbaugh stream. And then Rush Limbaugh would take a day off and have a meltdown. Thank you, John Allen. I appreciate that, man. I know that. Like, I feel that. Thank you very much for that. eBay top seller. Woo! eBay top seller. Got a gift from DC Metro. There we go. Thank you, DC Metro, once again. Yeah, apparently it's a pretty good Metro. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but there's a great video of John Brennan, who is being asked questions out there. He's like looking at his phone. I don't want to talk to you. So maybe I'll find John Brennan out there on the DC Metro and ask him some questions. Legally, peacefully, and patriotically, of course. Let's see what's going on over on locals. We had a couple comments. I think Jake Sullivan from Oxford is over there. And We'll see what he has. Oh, I forgot to post on X. Dang it. All right, so here we go. Here's another one. Yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. This morning on the member stream, we were talking about who could possibly replace Pam Bondi, for example. Okay, this is a conversation that's happening. You know, people are saying maybe there should be a changing of the guard. Names are being thrown around. This morning, the conversation was in the context of Ken Paxton. Like what happens if John Cornyn wins the primary? Could Ken Paxton be the AG? And my response was, you got to get him through the Senate. So it's going to be very hard to get somebody better than Pam Bondi through the Senate. In other words, somebody who's more effective against the deep state, indicting Comey, indicting Clapper, indicting Obama, indicting whatever. Somebody would have to be, I would say, more in alignment with the deep state than Pam. So how do you get them through the Senate in order to change out the guard? E. Texley is thinking back to it. Says Lee Zeldin and John Ratcliffe were both Senate confirmed during the session. Ratcliffe's at the CIA. He's not giving that up. Zeldin, maybe. Is he a lawyer? During this session and might make it through the confirmation process easily. Zeldin was confirmed 56-42. Ratcliffe confirmed 74-25. Previously a U.S. attorney in Texas. He and a previous U.S. attorney, John Ashcroft, were law partners. Senate probably would grudgingly confirm whomever Trump may nominate to be CIA director because the senators would not want that chair to sit empty. I don't think Ratcliffe would want to leave the CIA to go to DOJ. Lee Zeldin, too. That's a tight confirmation, 56-42. We were contemplating, like, maybe Eric Schmidt. I think Eric Schmidt is a senator. I think the Senate would pass a senator. So, or like Hawley, like Josh Hawley from Missouri, might make him AG. He's a lawyer. He's got aggressiveness to him, so he could go through. But the Senate wants probably another senator to go. Just like when they were confirming Marco Rubio. Rubio was, I think, confirmed like, 99-1. So how do you, who can you put up there? People are saying Trey Gowdy, former. Yeah. So thank you, E-Texley. Nathan, hey, you mentioned that you may get an ultrasound. I'd mentioned I've heard of issues of it hurting the baby. Oh my gosh. Like the jabs, there's a lot of info out there. Gaslighting victims, otherwise obscuring the things that happen. So be careful. If you must use low power, do some research. Man, I didn't even think about that. As I've heard stories of them causing brain damage. Great. Great. Thank you, Nathan, for that one. Gonna have to ask about that. Yeah, I've been asking a lot of questions. That's interesting. Doesn't sound good. Thank you, Nathan. All right, well, we're going to the doctors tomorrow, next week, I think. Amy Ann, that Fulton County guy looks like a black George Soros. Rob Pitts? Yeah, that's kind of right, with the droopy faces. Yeah, that's right. Kind of like the dark side. You know what it does to your face, like in the movies. Kind of all crunched up. Yeah. It's Jake from Oxford. Very smart comment. All right, let me dig into some IQ points because he's so smart. Okay, Rob, it's been a pretty crazy last few weeks. Dave was promoted to an investigator. Also, today is Fast Tuesday, the last day of Mardi Gras. So getting Dave to do anything for me lately has been impossible. With all that said, before another day goes by, here is my official statement on the event known as Baby Rob. This is from Jake, Hillary Clinton's former national security advisor, who's also a part of our community. It says, I hope you can tell the enthusiasm in my voice. What about my show? Because Jake, owns the show. You know who doesn't have surprise babies? Pete. Probably Pete Booty. Because men can't get Wait, don't type that. We can't say men can't have What? Don't type that either. Rob, congratulations on what is truly the greatest, most awarding life event you can ever have happen. I hope Alexis has a peaceful, happy pregnancy. Yeah, I think she's honestly doing really, really well. It's been, I think, pretty good. Like she's had a couple days of kind of some weird stuff, not feeling great, but otherwise, I think she's doing great. It's been beautiful. I'm sure several men can tell you hilarious stories about their wives and the strange cravings. Truly awesome news. Everyone is so happy for you, man. We're super happy. We're like as excited as can be. And it's just like the time is going fast. Like July, new baby. Ah. Thank you, Jake, for the nice comment, man. Really nice comment. I thought you were going to say something, more like Hillary Clinton-esque or something. But Jake, really nice of you to say that. Shout out to Dave. We love Dave. And we're grateful for you. It is awesome news. Thank you very much, Jake and Dave. We appreciate you. Amy Ann says, trust but verify is one of the most basic of social contracts. That's why you save the tapes and the images and the chain of custody, because no one trusts you when you just say, trust me. Don, the illegal with a CDL that hit the Amish van had a Pennsylvania CDL, I believe. It also has a real ID star on it. I saw that, Don. Yeah, and that came from Josh Shapiro out there. And at what point do the government officials who are giving real ID to illegal aliens or non-citizens that say, oh, you're a citizen, driving CDLs, killing Americans, like where does the accountability come in? Like they know they shouldn't be doing that. Are they not responsible for that vicariously? Thank you, Don. Crazy KPM says, George Bush was the NGO that flew in the insurgency. I can blame on him, no problem. Yeah, George Bush. We remember that. Hey, Amy Ann, cheaters, baby eaters. Oh, what? Is that an Epstein comment? Hey, I think Fetterman, Don, is playing both sides of the fence. He says I'd vote, but won't sponsor. I don't think he supports proving you're a citizen. His state gives illegals driver's licenses. Yeah, no, Fetterman kind of runs his mouth, but then he always votes with the Democrats. Not always, but largely. I think he's a no on the SAVE Act, even though he said, I think it's reasonable to check ID. But like I said, when push comes to shove, it's the same comment that we talked about earlier. Democrats bundle up. They circle the wagons, they defend and protect themselves, but don't actually vote for good policy for Americans if it's adverse to the Democratic Party. This one from Tobo says Kilmar wins again. Federal judge says he cannot be re-detained. Yep. Who said this one? Paula Zenas. Rhymes with. Paula Zenas. From this, the court easily concludes there is no good reason to believe removal is likely in the reasonably foreseeable future. It's like a joke. All right. It's Judge Zenas should be ashamed of herself and impeached. Hey, what's up, Sandy? Hey, I missed most of the show. Yeah, Sandy, thank you for the heads up on the topic today. Sandy was asking about Fulton County this morning. And, let's talk about it. This Georgia election stuff is crazy. Elections are critical infrastructure. And if attack is equal to electoral grid attack, this is treason, not sedition or insurrection. The definition of enemy becomes the splitting hair. Trump's got this. Fun stuff. Yeah, so the Brennan subpoenas are out. The Venezuelan, Maduro, and CIA director are in custody. We got the Fulton County ballots. It's looking like it's going to get spicy. Sandy, autocorrect made me say electoral grid. I meant electric grid. Yeah, exactly right. It is critical infrastructure. And to just deal with it so haphazardly, again, if you're prosecuted for a crime and they did this sloppy type of prosecution, your case would be dumped. So why is an election any different? We want validity. We want to trust our elections beyond a reasonable doubt. Why can't that happen? Sandy, thank you for the comments. NY says, I'm looking fairly at this. I think Bondi, compared to other AGs, has done a good job. She's stuck with Trump through impeachment and his legal team. Yeah, Bondi's not all bad. I mean, she's done some things. She's had some Supreme Court victories, some good wins there. I have to think hard about that, a little bit harder. But there has been a lot of botching too. I guess my point, like the Epstein files was completely botched. That's a complete own goal. But what if you replace her, what else do you get? That's my concern. And it might get way worse than Pam Bondi. So you just have to, consider that in the entire equation. Like it's very easy to just say, get rid of Pam, but who comes in next? And what are they going to do? Because Trump had a lot more political cachet when we got Pam through than he does now, just genuinely. And so, I don't know, maybe you get another AG who's like really aggressive with the Epstein files, but then focuses only on that and then doesn't go after the Comeys, the Clappers, the Brennans. Like, I honestly think the next person would abandon all of those efforts. because it would be kind of a contingency, like a condition of being nominated in the Senate. They would all ask about that. Yeah, NY. Yeah, think about all the other Trump AGs, like Bill Barr was, also a joke. Rod Rosenstein, or the other guy. Jeff Sessions. Yeah. It's a tough position. It really is a tough position. Jan, thank you for the dono. But if you say you can handle the job and do it well, then you need to handle the job and do it well. Like Pam, we are still, we're still missing a lot of U.S. attorneys in certain positions. Is that her fault or is that Chuck Grassley's fault? The judges have gone absolutely insane. Is that Pam's fault or is that the judge's fault? Or is that Congress's fault because they're not impeaching the judges? So, but we do want more. Don't get me wrong. We want more out of it. Jan, what's up? Says, call Thune on air and tell him how many leaders you have to tell him what we want, then challenge all the other podcasters to do the same. Matt Morse did it. Shout out to Matt Morse. He's got a great channel. Matt Morse TV right next door on YouTube. Call Thune on air and tell him how many leaders you have to tell him what we want, then challenge all other podcasters to do the same. Start taking calls on air. That's not a bad idea. I thought about that actually. I don't know how I would do that. Maybe Google Voice or like a Zoom thing, but then I could like patch it in here and maybe even have your calls. That'd be kind of fun. Great idea. Shout out to Matt Morse for the good idea. Thank you, Jan, for sharing that with us and for the nice dono in the house. Kilmar, oh gosh, that case is so obnoxious. Indeed. All right, so my friends, it's been a beautiful stream. Thank you for joining us. We'll leave it here on the night. Want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths. Big shout outs to Donut, Mind Me, John in the house. Thank you for clipping for us. Muffin Rando. Of course, we got Neuro, D, Janik, and Dog Digger over on the Rumbles, locking the fort down for us over there. We've got K-Bean, Carrie B in the mornings, Geegum Geegum, Elliot, and just Rhonda, my friends. And thank you for being here. Thanks for subscribing to our channel if you have not already done that so that we don't miss you again and all the things. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to get into it again. And before we do, let me say goodbye to some friends. Londo, what's up? John Allen, NY's in the house. We've got Villa Plot, what's going on? Sharing the image of Judge Zenas. Quell, what's going on, Quell? Rose for Life, very nice to see you. Sandy, great to see you. We've got Granite Monument. Eleanor Schoonover, lots of shout outs, man, for Eleanor. Eleanor, once again, thank you for that nice dono. And lots of thanks. May God continue to bless you, Eleanor. Shout out. Thank you, Granite Monument, for shouting out. Doan, Zach the Saint. We've got tons of friends. Mary Canfield, Jerry Scholes. We got Frida Speech, Neuro D, J-Mod, Trebly Clef. What's up, Delay is Obvious? J-Mod's over there. No Wimps at all. Jesus Stan, nice to see you. Lemon Zinger, and more. It's a beautiful day. All right, my friends, it's been a great stream. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, if you're a member, we see you in the morning. Otherwise, we're coming back tomorrow to get into it again. And in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night. Sleep very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers, truth on our side. Watching the watchers, we won't be denied. Watching the watchers, eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through